Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Click R3 number 17. There's a lot happened last couple weeks here. We had a state of play. There was an interview that blew up the internet. I started playing Returnal again. Man, stuff's going crazy over here.
You did.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
John out here making sound decisions. I can get behind this.
Making some moves. All right. We got and that's actually I went from replaying Shadow of the Colossus, the remade Blue Point one, beat that, and then went to Returnal again.
Good choice.
Just going from greatness to greatness over here. Ryan, how you doing?
Doing well, John. I was just refreshing a bunch of Amazon links trying to get this Final Fantasy Magic the Gathering bullshit that just went up today.
What?
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw like someone go, they revealed 4 cards for Final Fantasy Cross Magic the Gathering. I'm like, what in the world?
Yeah.
What's going on around here?
That collaboration was announced, I think, like late last year, and they just like IGN had a reveal for some of the cards and like the product lineup, and some of the pre-orders went up today, and I'm like, oh shit, I gotta get on that.
Yeah. That's the most random thing. How many cards are there?
So I don't know what the set is. I mean, so I'm not even a huge MTG guy, obviously, but it's one of those things where, like, I guess the community is kind of up in arms about how Magic the Gathering, Jesus, is half original, and then half of it's all this like Beyond Worlds thing that they're doing, where it's a huge crossover with other IP and things like that. So, yeah. But it's one of those things where if like they do the IP you really like, it's like, oh well, obviously you're gonna buy it. So
yeah, they got you. They know. They got you.
They got me.
Is it that limited? Like, is it everyone just refreshing the page trying to get this thing?
I would assume so, but at the same time, like I don't think TCG Player has any listings up just yet, and that's where like a bunch of actual like LGS stores are gonna start putting up their products. So it should get a lot more, I would say, wider as far as availability goes, but I'm sure it'll still probably get snatched up pretty quickly.
Got to deal with the Magic the Gathering fans and the Final Fantasy fans. Good luck. Good luck with that.
I know, yeah, and I almost never buy MTG product, obviously, since I'm mostly a Yu-Gi-Oh guy, but they got me. They got me.
I remember when Magic first showed up, and my dad and I got the VHS tape for it, where it teaches you how to play it. And then I think we played it for a little bit into middle school, high school, and then I fell out of it completely. So no idea what happened with that whole meta or anything, but apparently Final Fantasy's with it now. So there you go.
Final Fantasy, there's an Assassin's Creed one. There was like a Fortnite collab. Yeah, lots of stuff.
Fortnite, yeah. I can see that. Fortnite gets around with everyone, basically. So I get it.
So they're easy. They're easy is what you're saying.
Yeah, sure. We'll go with that. They're just everywhere. Fortnite is all over the place, man. Yep. Well, I get it was we'll say an eventful like 10 or 11 days for PlayStation.
Yeah, we got a lot going on. Maybe try and breeze through some of these relatively fast, but there's a lot happening.
How goes your Final Fantasy rebirth journey?
Oh, thank you for asking, John. I'm in the Junon region right now, 25 hours in, mind you. About 25 hours in. Of course, I'm doing the thing where it's like any side thing that comes up, I clear it right away. So main path does not get progressed until I do all the Queen's Blood stuff, all the side quests, the clearing out the whole region. So I actually just wrapped up most of the Junon region, which you were right with that card game in there. That card game's kind of interesting,
good, right?
Yeah,
they might actually. They were talking about maybe releasing that as like a physical thing at some point.
I was sitting there thinking like this could easily be printed as an actual TCG. I don't see why it couldn't be. So
yep.
Yeah.
I thought it'd be fun if they spun it off and it became its own thing, even as like a fun little like side $20 game or something.
I was kind of hoping like there was actual booster packs like that you could buy, but when you buy them, it's like a one-time, you just buy it once, then you get like 3 cards. I'm like, well, what the? There's no RNG. Like this is kind of weak.
I could see them turning that into a whole like. You're right. You could get booster packs for it, even if it's not physical, and they just do like a little side thing for it, maybe even on mobile phones. But they can have like, all these different characters and enemies from all the different Final Fantasies thrown in and weekly drive. That could be a whole thing. It's a very fun like digital card game thing that just goes along with the main game.
I mean, well, it's just like every 2 seconds, there's like a mini game you can do. Like, Jesus Christ. Fort Condor too from Intermission, which was, that was really fun too.
some of those bosses you're fighting though, like they have some of the hunts that you can do where you go and find like the stronger enemy on the
Yeah.
map, and then
Mhm.
they're a lot easier if you come back to the region later. Like if you get stuck on one, and it's like it's pretty easy to get back to some of those regions,
Oh,
like teleporting around.
yeah, I would imagine so. I do want to sort of scale with the game with everything that I'm doing, so everything feels like slightly challenging. But it always bothers me that I can't like play on hard right away. That always bugs me.
Yep, they want you to play
Yeah.
through it again.
I mean, yeah, like but the whole way I'm the whole time I'm like, I'm gonna do this again. Son of a bitch.
Yeah.
The whole way I'm
Yep.
playing. In the back of my head, I'm just like, I can't believe they want me to do this again for a trophy.
Good luck with that platinum. That's going to be a whole thing for you.
I'll do it. I will do it. It's gonna take. Look, I mean, what? It's February right now. It was like the start of February when I started playing, so we'll just keep track of how long this takes me.
All right. We'll keep a track of Ryan's rebirth playthrough.
Well, no. So, are you doing your homework over here? What's up with this Returnal playthrough? You want to just wait till we talk about Saros or something? What's
Yeah.
going on?
I mean, we can.
All
Well,
right,
I'll tell you,
right.
but since you already mentioned it, I did see it pop. It popped up and stuff, and I liked Returnal. I played through it, but I didn't do the platinum for it at all. So I was like, look, I said, I kind of want to play it again. I was sitting there like I didn't do the tower either, because that was after the game had already come and gone, and I played. I was like, do I maybe? And I just never got around to it. But I saw the stars thing pop up. I was like, you know what? I do kind of want to go back to Returnal, and just the gameplay is just really good. It's been long enough. Let me go back and play it again. And because you start from the beginning, you can start from the beginning and beat the game in one sitting or whatever. Let me go back. And I forget a lot of the movements and stuff right away, but you get used to it in like an hour. And now I'm going through, and I figured I'll just platinum the thing at this point. So
just decided on a whim. I'll platinum it.
Yeah. So I need to the thing that I don't like about the platinum in this one is it is RNG based for the most part. So
I was going to say, you can't necessarily just do this in a timely manner. It's the glyphs. There's no getting around it.
I've completed 2 of the areas so far, and the other ones I'm missing like 2 or 3 glyphs per. So it's gonna be me just running through and finding the blue doors and hoping that I get the right spawn.
You're lucky because I platinumed it like a few days after the game came out or something. The first week, I can't remember, but in that small window where the game was fresh, there was this running thing going on with everybody in the community going like, where is this last glyph? Where is this last scout log? And like one of the scout logs is in the when on a fresh file when you just start the game, the first run is scripted, as in the rooms are determined. So there's always a scout log in like one of the first rooms on your very first boot up of the game. If you miss that, people were like locked out of finding that scout log.
Oh,
so like they had to do a patch later on to make that scout log appear in more rooms. And then there were like 1 or 2 glyphs in one of the biomes. I don't remember which ones, but it was like impossible to find. Like it was just so hard to like get it to pop up. And I was right in the middle of that shit where I'm like, I can't get this glyph to pop up. It took longer than it needed to.
I feel like I've been coming across them at a decent enough pace. Like I haven't been pulling my hair out trying to find one multiple runs through. It seems like every time I do a run, I find 1 or 2. So I'm getting there. I'm getting there. And I did all the little things like attach a bunch of parasites, get 200% integrity, but I'm just doing all that stuff. And I think I'll have that platinum done probably before the end of this week. So
gotta say, I'm proud of you. Good stuff.
So I was in the mood doing it. I realized I didn't have that many trophies left. It's just the glyphs, and it's like, well, whatever. I'm already going through and completed 2 of them, just playing it again. So
very good.
I'll roll through and get that done.
Very good. Very good. Returnal is so goddamn good. That's still my favorite PS5 game. Easily.
That's still the one. That's the one.
It's like, I love Astro Bot, obviously, but like Returnal is just such a gameplay ass game. I love that shit. It's so damn good. All right. You want to get into some stories here, John?
Yeah. We should probably get moving on
that. We got the PS Plus Extra February lineup. It's live on PSN right now. Very small lineup, actually. I think this is the fewest amount of games they've ever offered on Extra, which is Star Wars Jedi Survivor, Topspin 2K25, Lost Records Bloom and Rage, which was a day 1 launch into Extra. We've got Saga Frontier Remastered, Somerville, Tin Hearts, and Mordhau, something like that. Mordhau. And then PS Plus Premium, Patapon 3, PSP, and Dropship United Peace Force for PlayStation 2.
That feels very random.
Very random. That is a title they published like right before London Studios was like formally established. So it was like one of the offshoot studios from Psygnosis at the time. It was like a weird transitionary period, but it's I never played it, but it's one of those kind of out of nowhere games that Sony published.
Okay. I mean, Jedi Survivor is very good. I recommend that. It's had a bunch of patches. It runs better now on console, has PS5 Pro support, I think, ironed out. So that's probably the one to go with. Yeah.
Only 7 games. 7 games on extra. That's definitely
Topspin
not
as well. Lot. I bought Topspin, and then I got that situation of after I bought it, it goes into extra like a month and a half later.
That's bound to happen. I think the only thing out of this that I actually played is Somerville. I did that during 30 Platinums Part 3. No platinum, but it's a very cool game.
Cool game. Yeah. There's no platinum in it.
No platinum. I learned that the hard way.
Oh, you did it as a 30 days thing, and there wasn't even a platinum in it, so you got all the trophies and it never gave you one?
I remember this distinctly, because obviously it's like, why don't you just check the list? Like, what are you doing? So the way this happened was like, I always look up guides. I'm like, okay, what's the guide? How long is it going to take? Especially for that video, because it's very time sensitive. So typically I'll try and platinum a game that is, in the neighborhood of like 5 to 8 hours, because I don't want to do easy stuff, but it still has to be done in a day on average. So when I looked up Somerville, I found the achievement guide, and it's like, it doesn't matter if it's from the PlayStation side or Xbox, it's same guide, obviously. So the guide said like, oh, it's going to take like 5 hours, 1,000 achievements. And I was like, or 1,000 gamer score. And I'm like, okay, great. So I put that game on my list, booted it up, started playing, not realizing that it's 1,000 gamer score on Xbox, but there's no platinum on PlayStation, which is very like, I don't want to say unusual, because Microsoft made this change it's actually probably 4 or 5 years ago now at this point, but they made a choice at the time where they stopped doing 200 gamer score like Xbox Live. Well, I say Xbox Live Arcade, but downloadable titles. Right. Now it's no matter what, it's always 1,000 gamer score per game. But Sony never, like, you can still do PSN titles without platinum. So like they just for some reason the studio chose to do that. I don't know why. But like I looked at the Xbox guide thinking it's obviously going to be a platinum on PlayStation. That's how I fucked that up, basically.
3 off, man.
Yeah.
You played all the way through it 5 or 6 hours, and
almost. Almost. I was like, I basically like was in the middle of the first playthrough, already popped a few trophies, and I'm like, why? Oh my god, there's no platinum. What the hell?
That taint your profile too. Your profile's tainted now too. No platinum on that.
No, I still 100%ed it. I got plenty of PS and 100% games. I don't do them often anymore, because most studios don't do them anymore. Why would you? Always give your game a platinum.
Yeah, might as well.
Yeah. So that was a little story that still haunts me. We do have
got it on video too, right?
Yeah, it's in 30 Platinums Part 3. People probably saw it.
Is it just an extra one because it wasn't a platinum? So it's 31 games?
I had to basically say like, oh, I fucked up. Here's what happened, basically. So it was like not meant to be in the challenge, but I threw it in anyway. We do have some PS Plus adjacent announcemements, though, from the State of Play. We'll talk about the State of Play later, obviously, but just for the relevancy of the PS Plus topic, we can mention that Sony made an announcement that they're going to do more day one launches relatively soon. So there's Blueprints that's launching day one on Extra this spring. And that's like a genre-bending architectural adventure game. That's what they describe that game as. And then Abiotic Factor is launching day one this summer, which that's a 6-player survival crafting game, which apparently is very popular. So that is going to be coming to PlayStation 5 and launching day one into Plus. And then also the first 3 Armored Core games for the PS1 is going to launch on PS Plus Premium as well. First 3 Armored Core games, which is pretty cool. You got some FromSoft.
Kind of random
in there. Seems random.
They wanted to tell us about it so early.
They've done that before, though. I think it was the same State of Play last year, actually, like around the same time, where they just made some announcement about like, here's some premium games coming. And I believe that was Dino Crisis at the time. It's Dino Crisis and something else, but they just like called that out during a State of Play for whatever reason. So
yeah, I mean, these Armored Core games came out like 9 months between, like the release cadence was pretty quick back then for these games. And now they would have just been expansions for the same game, but obviously they couldn't do that back then. But I mean, it's PS1 Armored Core, so it's just funny. I guess they're making a big deal because it's from Soft, but people are gonna go back and play these games and be like, oh yeah, it was pretty janky back then.
Well, you know, my line of thinking here is like, because the big issue with premium, as we've discussed many times with the classics program, it's not necessarily emulating the games, it's just licenses. What can they realistically get nowadays? And considering this formal agreement, this investment, this strategic capital partnership, maybe, you know, that would lead into Sony having the blessing to now exploring more of the FromSoft catalog. I mean, they already had a good relationship anyway, but maybe this just sort of gives them a wider range of titles that they can start offering. Maybe some of the PS2 FromSoft stuff that we saw during that time as well, which I think is maybe more exciting than the PS1 stuff. But that's what I would hope that is maybe what's going to end up happening.
Yeah. No, I mean, hey, and Armored Core is still fun. So there you go.
Still fun, yeah. And a little offshoot here, we did just have Disney Pixar Wall-E rated in Taiwan.
I saw that.
Yeah, as we said before, like Disney's, the Disney stuff will not stop until the whole catalog is put back on PSN.
They're all in.
They're all in. So you got Wall-E coming to you hot.
Is it the PSP or the PS2 one?
Well, John, hey, now it could be either or. So
I don't even. I didn't play that at all. Back. I have no idea what that play. I assume it's one of those like simplistic kind of 3D platformers from those days.
I would be more surprised if you did play it. So
there were a lot of movie tie-in games. That was like the generation of movie tie-ins. If there was a movie and they could come up with some kind of general premise for a game, they did it.
Yeah, maybe Wall-E's like a side scroller. I don't know. I've never seen gameplay of it.
It's like a hidden gem or something we just never played. We just wrote it off because it was Wall-E.
Don't call it a hidden gem. Come on.
Hey, you got a platinum trophy?
It might have a platinum if implicit.
Hey, 30 days for 30 platinum part 9 or whatever.
I am not playing.
Coming up.
I'm not playing Wall-E. Because the new lineup is up on PSN, we have some games leaving the PS Plus catalog. So this is a warning for everybody out there. You've got about 30 days left to play Monster Energy Supercross, the official video game 6, which is one hell of a goddamn title. I don't know why they name those games like that. Resident Evil 3, Dragon Ball Z Kakarot, Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney Trilogy, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure All-Star Battle R, Life is Strange 2, Life is Strange True Colors, Final Fantasy Type 0 HD, Street Fighter 5, and Mortal Kombat 11. Absolute fire is leaving the catalog soon.
I was going to say that's a lot of good stuff.
This is all good. Maybe Monster Energy is the one standout there, but otherwise that's all good stuff. So play those games.
Yeah. They gave you plenty of time. It's what 10 days.
Oh no, it's February. It's the middle of the month right now, so they've got till the middle of March. So
okay. Oh, okay. There you go. You got a month. You got a month.
Yeah.
Still, oof. There's a lot of good games leaving.
Those are good ones.
Subscription service. They cycle through.
Yeah, they cycle. They'll be back. They'll be back. John, let's talk about this PSN outage, huh? God, where were you when this happened? What were you doing in the moment?
We were on the podcast.
Oh yeah, that's right. And the one
people
spot
were in like, hey, PSN's down, and we were like, it'll be up. It'll be back in like an hour. It's doing that.
That's
Maybe
right.
It's just intermittent. It happens, and then they were like, the next day, it's still down.
I forgot about that. Yeah, I came back on the Spawncast for a bit, and that was like right. That was like right when it went down. Yeah, it didn't go back up until like pretty much almost 24 hours later. So almost a full day, which, everyone's a little concerned here. We got a company that's got a history of this where it was down for 23 days. Now, they didn't beat the record, and thankfully they didn't get very close to it. But when it did go back up, they issued a statement. They said they fully recovered from an operational issue. And then they also said all PS Plus members got an automatic 5-day extension on their membership. Seems like a kind of an open and shut case. I know some were like freaking out over this, but I don't know. Like,
I think people were concerned that there was like a hack or something very malicious happened.
Yeah.
And it doesn't seem to be the case, because I feel like if it was really bad, like people's information, they'd have to say something. This sounds like somebody tripped the switch somewhere and they were like, oh no. And they had to figure it out kind of thing. Like they had to go through and figure out what change did what. Maybe when they're updating or doing stuff in the back end. But it was weird because I guess the online multiplayer aspect didn't work, but trophy syncing did work.
Well, yeah.
So
this
cloud save upload didn't, and it was very weird.
It was like they say operational issue. Like I would say that's probably what happened because it was very weird. Like, I don't know about you. I could still log in. Like you could,
Yeah.
yeah, you could log in. This wasn't some sort of like hard cutoff, like nobody can sign in. Like you could log in and yeah, it was like very intermittent. Like if you went to account management, wouldn't work. Trophy syncing might work. The other offshoot story here is that during the outage, one person wanted to test out pairing a disk drive to their PS5. Now they said that their experience was they couldn't. I myself also wanted to test it. So I did try to pair a drive 3 times. All 3 times I did get it to pair. So, I mean, you would assume it still needs the handshake with PSN, but for whatever reason, like it allowed me to do it. But point being, like we're looking at a kind of a, as they say, probably an operational issue, some sort of weird back end nonsense going on.
Mm-hmm. I get why people get worried when that happens because of their history. You're right. Sony is under that microscope if that ever happens. It definitely made people once again realize like how reliant we now are on just servers, online servers for our systems, our games, whatever. And if you don't have your system right now, like right now, you play all the time, you don't have it set as your primary system, you want to set it as that because this always happens every time when something goes down. My digital games don't work, and it turns out they don't have it set as primary. So I'm putting that out there right now. It takes a minute to do it. You go in your options, you set it up. So do that now.
Yep, that is 100% right. I don't know how this happens though. I mean, it's got to be circumstances where people are like a multi-console household or something, or they're game sharing. Because that's
sharing,
why. Yeah, like the thing is, like when everybody bought a PS5, what Sony does is that automatically the first PS5 you sign into, which you would assume for most people that's the console you buy, it's automatically primary. You can have a primary PS4 and a 5. So you can have 2 consoles from 2 separate generations. The second you buy another one or like sign into another one, or so, that's where it's obviously going to get screwy. So it is DRM, but generally, like most people, it should be on for you. If it's not, then as John said, check account settings.
I think also if you bought like a PS5 Pro, I don't know, maybe you didn't have it completely set up right away.
Yeah, that too.
When you think about it. So that just putting it out there. If you don't have it, you might as well, because that's the only way you're going to be playing your digital games if there's an outage like this at this point.
This is true. Or you install games via disk.
But for how long? But for how long?
how long do you install the game via disk?
How long can we keep doing that? How long?
I think for another generation. After that, probably not. There was that though. Yeah, that post did go viral from the Does It Play account. So huge shout out to that community. They do really important work there, but that is a concern. You know, can't pair a disk drive during an outage if there's no server available. It's not a problem now, but it could be in 20, 30 years when we're talking about a lot of secondhand consoles and drives and possible e-waste. So
it's worse if it goes down for a month and you can't get your account or you can't get your system set up with the I don't think that's gonna. I mean, I guess I shouldn't say that because I say that now and then next week it happens, but most likely it won't go down for a month again because that would get crazy for Sony if it did. I assume you'd be able to get yourself set up because when it's knocked offline, you can't even set your primary console. Then you're just like stuck.
Yeah, I mean, if we see like an extended outage, then it would be like kind of batshit insane.
Yeah.
In this case, though, do you have any like? What do you feel about the response time? I mean, should they really be saying something like within mere hours, or because in my head I'm thinking like if they don't say something in 24 hours, then it's kind of like alarm bells are ringing. But,
yeah,
I don't know.
So. That's the tough part. I feel like communication might be a little better. Like, you know how sometimes you go to like Comcast for me, if their stuff goes down and you're going to their site, they almost update that website every 30 minutes or so, like a little status thing, and they'll even tell you like where maybe they're like a line went down or something. Oh, this repair person's going out to look at it, and this is when our estimated time for it to come. Like they do at least update that, even though Comcast is very annoying in general. They're at least doing that, whereas Sony, it shows you like a somewhat real time in the sense that if it can't detect that it's everything's good, it'll just show you that red dot for like different things in their sign in online play. it seems like there has to be a better way for this when it's, an $80 a year service minimum to play online and do all this stuff. Just something that is like a running tally of, okay, what's happening? What are we doing right now? Rather than just what looks like a static page at all times.
That's a good analogy. That's a really good point. Yeah. I mean, I think that would be great if the page had a little bit more, transparency as far as the, I guess, expected uptime too.
Yeah. Like, when do we think it's coming back? Is this a month? People were immediately like, oh my gosh, it might be down for a month. So, yeah. Well, I don't know if that's going to happen, but then we got to the next day and I'm like, oh man, this thing's still down.
It does seem like the obvious concern would be like an intrusion, but I feel like the company would have taken that in a very different manner, assuming that would have been, if that happened, because they've very surely have learned their lessons from over 14 years ago now at this point. So we did have that going on. How about this story? So more PSN news here, but we had that piece over on IGN where Rebecca Valentine did a whole story about the AI asset flip stuff on PSN. A lot of that stuff's been plaguing like the eShop and Steam. So it's the same thing on PSN. You've got a lot of games that are using AI imagery, and some of the gameplay screenshots on the store page can look very misleading. The thing is, when that article went live, like the same day, Sony delisted nearly like 100 plus games from one particular publisher, which they were called Random Spin Games. And I've seen their stuff on PSN before. It just like a lot of...
You made a video on this, didn't you?
Yeah, I talked about it right away. There was there's just so much of it now that's starting to flood in. But like this one publisher, they were doing, I don't know, like the sort of trend here is like simulator games. They had so many simulator titles. And then the AI art is very much misleading in the sense that, like, sure, you can have key art, but like sometimes that kind of meshed into the screenshots for the game, which would be super misleading. Obviously, you would think a lot of that stuff probably isn't going to play well right off rip, but to also maybe make the suggestion that the game is something else, and then you download it and find that it's not a good look. Not a good
What
look.
A name though. Random Spin Games. It's like, I wonder if they're the company doing all the AI asset flips. Who'll know? Oh, who would know? Random.
Well,
it's amazing.
The thing is though, there's still like a lot on there. Because like, not to like gloss over the article, Rebecca did a great sort of breakdown as far as like the process for sending a game in for cert, what they're really looking for. It's not really quality assurance for those that don't know it. They're just looking for certain technical behavior patterns for a game as far as like input, if a controller dies during gameplay, that's like what cert is, right? They're not looking at a game going like, oh, is this a quality title? Does it run well? They're not doing anything like that, right? So the sort of conclusion that the article comes to is that like the way PSN does it is that once you're in the dev portal, like it's kind of more of a hands-off thing. They might look at your store page just one time, but generally like once you're in, and that's how all this stuff is starting to flood PSN. And then there's no accountability, as in like all these businesses, you can't contact them. They've got no page, no website. There's nowhere to sort of go and make a complaint. And there is still a lot of the stuff on PSN. Last time I checked, and it's definitely a lot of the AI art too. So you would think of that after that article and maybe some more pressure, they'll maybe start reconsidering what the process here as far as like publishing games on the service. Let me ask you this, John, because it's like with the eShop and Steam, there's always been this running conversation as far as like, should they just start saying no to like certain, like we don't want your game. Like we looked at it. It looks like crap. We don't want it. Or should it be an open storefront?
Yeah, that's a good question, because it's like, well, where do you draw the line then with some of these games? Because there are games in the past that you would look at now. Let's say Flappy Bird was going to come out on PlayStation. Never heard of it before. Yep. It's going to come out on PlayStation 5. You would look at that now and be like, is this an asset flip? I don't know. It looks like that low quality kind of game, but then it ends up being incredibly popular. People are selling phones that had it on it for like 50 grand or something because people desperately want a Flappy Bird. So it's hard to say in that regard. But I think it's pretty obvious when you get a game whose sole purpose is press a button, get a platinum. I mean, that's obvious, right? When you're leveraging this achievement system, this just trophy system that the publishers put in place to, entice user engagement, and it's being leveraged there. But you're right. If a company shows up with a game that you look at and go, okay, that looks kind of bad, but it doesn't really break any of our rules. Like, do we say no to this? You feel like there's got to be some kind of quality assurance, though, because if your store is covered in this stuff, you're going to give bad experiences to the end user who may have spent $20 on something that they feel like they got ripped off for. And then it's also going to bury a lot of games that are higher quality, because like when you go to recent or whatever, it for a while there, I think you even showed that they changed some of the algorithm up, or just the way that they were placing this, if I'm not mistaken. But for a while there, it was just, okay, what's the newest thing? Everything else gets pushed down a notch. And that it floods the store. I think it ruins the overall user experience of discoverability. Because how great is it back in the day? I think it was a little different because there were just less games on. I know Xbox Live Arcade, that's a time period we're never going to get back again. Like, that was crazy. Some of the stuff that would show up, and it was once a week. It would update and you'd get all these games that were like interesting, but it wouldn't be, as I mentioned, like the low quality AI art kind of game. That was such an interesting time for discoverability. Now you gotta wade through, the flood of just low quality stuff to find the hidden gems.
Yeah, that's been my issue, is discoverability. I really wish there was a more personalized system that better understands the right way to recommend the kind of games that you would be looking forward to. And also just, making it so there's like visibility barriers on these titles if you are going to say let them all in. Because that's sort of where I sit on this too. It's like, if you start saying no to certain software, you are absolutely going to start rejecting games that in theory, like maybe it was like a passion project from one guy, and it turns out the game's actually really good and has an awesome gameplay loop, and it's on, let's say, Steam and the eShop, but for some reason PSM rejected it, and what's going on, and that's now bad publicity that's being thrown around with all these headlines of why Sony rejected this game, and Sony doesn't know why, because the system that they're trying to flag certain games, because they don't maybe have a manual human review process. It's just, there's so many can of worms that start happening when you start rejecting games. So I want to see the store get to a place where, like, sure, maybe a lot of stuff comes in, but we're maybe a little bit picky as far as how we, give those games visibility. At a certain point, it's like, yeah, all this bullshit's on PSN, but you'd never be able to find it, which is kind of how Steam deals with it, right? I mean, you almost
stupid amount of Steam games last year came out. I have to look at the exact number, but it was way too many.
And you almost never see them just based on that store experience. So that's probably I don't want to say the best way to navigate it, but maybe a better way to navigate it in the here and now. But they've probably need to sort of revamp the entire process as far as the shopping experience and the way that these games are presented to people.
This says last year, 2024, 19,000 games released on Steam, which is 52 games a day on average.
Yeah. You wouldn't know. Would you really know when you're checking Steam regularly? Does it feel like that?
No. It's just, that's the thing though. It's just so many games flood in, and you got to go to recent release tabs and then like uncheck some filters and stuff. And then eventually you'll get the full shotgun blast of games for the day. And a lot of it is just like low quality looking. Yes, that's what it is.
So I'd like to see them address it head on. It's tough though. I mean, there should also be some policies now on AI art and the usage of it. Just like when we upload videos on YouTube, we are asked, is there any sort of altered AI content in this?
It's true.
This video. So I mean, it should be the same thing. There should now be a policy, at least, that's a very black and white as far as AI use.
There has been a question of, are there just too many games coming out at all times now? And then this definitely does not help with that conversation. Like any of this crazy low quality asset flip AI driven games. And I feel like just with how AI is improving, it's only going to get worse. Like they're going to get more submissions next year than they do this year. And yeah, that's going to be, they got to come up with some kind of system for that.
I won't pretend to say like I know how they should approach this, because it's going to get worse. As you mentioned, it will get worse. So we had that happen. 130 something games delisted. I don't know why just that publisher though. There is still more on there.
The other thing is though, is as we're working towards like the digital era, that's the other thing that makes it a lot easier for these companies to do this. Whereas before, if you wanted to make we'll say a PS2 game, you had to get the thing on store shelves.
Mm-hmm.
But I give them respect. There were some bad games back then. Hey, they pressed the disc. They got the box art. They made a manual for that terrible game, but they got it there. They had to. So I'll give them credit there. There's a lot more work they had to. They had to put it in the work. Okay, couldn't just spit out the AI generated image for the front.
Bad games had to go through the same process as everything else. Now that's not the case. Doesn't feel like
they'd at least put their money where their mouth was with producing everything for it.
And it devalues the trophy system too. I mean,
that's true.
Somebody can make an account right now and earn the same platinums that I did in a 14-year span, and they can probably do that in a week.
Oh yeah, with like the quick platinum one. Yeah.
Yep. What does society come to? I really do not know. I'll tell you what though, we do have some good news here. Astro Bot, new levels, and PS5 Pro support. So that level that showed up during the London XP tournament event is live now on PSN, and more coming. So they're doing the same thing they did previously. New levels every Thursday up until March 13th. And also the game did get PS5 Pro support as well, which they said it now gets a constant best resolution running at 60 FPS. I don't think they actually put a resolution number on it, but probably just a boost. Looks better.
The game already looked and ran well anyway. Now it's just like, oh, cool. It's probably like right up against 4K for the most part now, I'd assume.
I'd have to imagine.
We kind of theorized this was going to happen after that new level was shown, though. So this to me lines up perfectly. Although I will say I wasn't expecting 5 weeks of it now. Like we're getting 5 left. I was thinking, oh, here's the tournament stage, maybe PS5 Pro support, as you mentioned, maybe a couple of bots they throw in there. Now here's 5 new levels. Like, okay, jeez,
more. Right.
So I did play it though. The first one I did play it.
I am again waiting for all of them.
Did you see what the bot is?
I am all one. Nope. So you better.
Okay.
Better be quiet, John. Can't spoil this for me.
The level was actually a little more. I mean, it's for that tournament, a little more difficult than the average level.
I'm hoping they get a little more challenging. I would not be opposed to that at all. We had a rumor prior to this as well and this comes from Bill Bukun writing for Deal Labs. They almost always see like early press material, so this is probably happening. But a PS5 Slim bundle with a disk drive and a download code for Astro Bot is apparently also coming March 13th, the final day that speedrun level comes out, which the price could be around 475 to 499 euros. I almost feel like this bundle maybe wouldn't happen if it weren't for the fact that this game is now just like sweeping award ceremonies left and right. And now it's like, here's a bundle with this Game of the Year contender. Like, here you go. It's an all-in-one package.
They won the DICE Awards,
Yeah,
like
one DICE.
I assume what they're going to do, it might not be this last stage, but eventually we got to get a stage where they have all their Game of the Year win trophies in there.
You said that before, yeah.
They need, but now DICE, they won all these. Like now you got to put all the trophies in there.
It just comes off in bad taste, I think.
Oh no, it's that. No. You unlock all the trophies we won. You go through and unlock them. You know what I would like to see, and it's just like a fun thing, like one-off thing. I don't know if they'll actually do it, but some kind of Astro Bot plate or plates, the shells for the PS5 Pro, PS5. That'd be fun. Even if it was like one of the plates that you buy, and maybe it's like an off-white kind of, or maybe it'd be kind of like a shiny white because it's a bot. But you have a little Astro maybe like at the bottom on the corner or something just hanging out. Something fun like that. Doesn't have to be like crazy and like you have the eyes, like I have the controller here. Maybe like the eyes and stuff. Just like a little shot with Astro at the bottom.
I can get behind that for sure. I mean, the console like in the game has blue eyes on like that black portion. Like put some eyes on that. So let's get goofy around here.
Hey, it's Game of the Year. It's winning Game of the Year all over the place. Might as well.
It really is. Which is incredible. I'm so happy for Team Asobi.
They also referenced Nintendo again.
Yeah, they sure did. They sure did. Which I think
-1.
I think that is it's I don't know how do I phrase this? Like it's a nice nod. It's it's classy, I guess is the better way to put it.
I think they're vying for. It sounds crazy because you never see this. I think they're vying for a little bit of Nintendo attention, trying to get their attention a little bit with this.
In what way?
I mean, it sounds like a far-fetched idea. I don't think it would necessarily happen. If there's ever a chance Astro and Mario are on the same screen.
I think for that to happen, it would maybe be a long time from now. I don't know if it would happen in the short term, and by short term I mean like a few years, maybe further out. You never know.
What if there was a Smash reveal and Astro was in Smash?
I mean, you would think it would be like probably that game, right? Where else would he show up?
Yeah, I was just thinking. It's just something that crossed my mind. It's like, man, they keep saying, "Hey, Nintendo, Nintendo, Nintendo." It's like, I wonder if they're just testing the water to see if Nintendo would be like, "Hey."
I mean, in fairness,
that one-off, that thing that no one would ever think would ever happen.
In fairness, I think that's mostly just Nicholas Duche doing that personally. I think he commented on this too when speaking with, I think it was Ben Hansen. Because I think he asked him, he's like, so why didn't you say Nintendo? And his answer was like, well, I just didn't want to get in trouble or something along those lines. I don't know. It's probably just.
There's those lines you assume they can't cross. But that's the thing. If you want to really shock and surprise people and be like, oh man, I didn't see that coming. It's like, some kind of, it'd be a little thing, I assume, somewhere, even if it's like a little Easter egg and you just get the sign off from Nintendo or something. I don't know. It could be something cool, but
I think the problem is neither of those companies are generally that open to something like that. They'll do it with Nintendo will do it with third parties and Sony will do it with third parties, but they themselves would not normally do it directly with one another.
Yeah.
I can't see it happening in the short term, but you never know. Let's move on to kind of a mandatory story here because it is a PlayStation Studio developer, but MLB The Show 25. It's been announced. Got a new trailer. Current gen only. And
finally,
no Game Pass. No Game Pass. The game will the game will only be available on PS5, Series X, S, and Nintendo Switch. Not Switch 2, which I'm not sure they're even allowed to say, technically. But coming out March 18th, and no Game Pass. So
I guess Microsoft was like, we've introduced it to our audience enough with this. Now we're just going to let it ride as its own thing.
I was going to say, do you think it's just like Microsoft not willing to like pay for it anymore? Or?
Probably. I'm sure MLB keeps negotiating like, we think it's going to be this much more this year. What do you want to do? And Microsoft's like, I think we're good. I feel like I almost think MLB The Show was also kind of a stopgap for them. They were trying to get their first party studio spun up to where they're releasing games consistently. And if you look at Microsoft's year for 2025, it looks like they're getting to that point. So maybe they just feel like they don't need MLB The Show as much in Game Pass anymore.
Well, I find like that was the kind of play. It's weird to say old Microsoft would have made, which they did, which was such an opportunistic sort of like, oh, this game that Sony has to now release on our platform, we have this opportunity to like offer the game on our service, and they have no leverage to say no. It's like, that seems like such a move they definitely wanted to take advantage of and did. And now they're just to a point where, as we've seen recently, like they're not really that invested in those kind of moves nowadays. Let's just, put it that way.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's kind of how it reads to me. And they just don't want to pay for it, probably. So something we didn't see at the State of Play, John, what was it? It was Death Stranding 2. And that's probably because there's going to be some news at South by Southwest 2025. So Kojima Productions has announced a panel for DS2 on the Beach for March 9th at South by Southwest in Austin, Texas. Which will have like the latest updates on the game. And this was also like right next to the game getting rated in Brazil and somewhere else. It just got rated again too. So
I think was it Korea?
Was it probably South Korea? I'm thinking. But I mean, this lines up perfectly. If it wasn't at the State of Play, like, what do you think they're going to do here? Probably, I would think the release date is going to be at this event. You think so?
Yep, I think release date. What month do you think?
Well, if it's getting rated, right? I mean, that now sounds to me like a summer game. right?
Okay.
Like
Okay.
June, like July, August, somewhere around there, you think?
I think it's coming out in June.
Yeah.
That's kind of what
I
I'm thinking right now.
I'd say so. Yeah, it feels like soon-ish.
Yeah, like I think that is set up as sort of Sony's first half of the year release. So I think June makes sense for him, and then Ghost Yote is like the second half release. If I had to like try to like figure out how they're placing things, the fact that Ghost Yote, as we're gonna say, it wasn't a state of play. It's not. I don't think it's coming out the first half of this year. Whereas Death Stranding 2, I feel like Kojima, he has a lot going on. He has that Fizzant, and then he also has OD with Xbox, and who knows, that might be multi-plat now at this point too. But like he has a lot happening, and I feel like his cadence currently is okay. We're gonna go Death Stranding 2, then we'll get to OD, then we'll get to Fizzant at some point. So I feel like it's time he wants to get this going. So he's also been teasing this trailer
Yeah,
a
that
lot
too.
online.
Yeah, yeah. It's like clearly they're going to be showing this thing soon. Like if it's not here, where else would it be?
I assume it's the release date trailer is what he's been teasing. So it's I think it's set up for June if I had to take a guess. So not too that'd be cool because then we'd be he would announce it there and we'd probably be like 3.5 months from release.
Yep. I would say we're looking good on that one. So we'll find out somewhat soon what's going on with that game. We do have some rumors I want to touch on before we talk about the state of play here. So we had this one about the next God of War, which we had the rumor prior about it being set in the Egyptian mythos. And then, like, right after that, we had Tom Henderson, owner of Insider Gaming, and talking recently on their podcast, the Insider Gaming podcast. They were talking about this rumor. And so Tom mentioned that he heard the game's going back in Greece and that it's going to be based on like a younger Kratos. Now, he clarified this, that he has no idea if it's a potential remake or if there's a remaster of the original trilogy. But, you know, there's a chance here, or he's implying that maybe it's like a reboot or a prequel of some kind, but he doesn't seem convinced, and he's not entirely sure because he didn't look into it. Like, it's one of those things where he would publish that story if he had like multiple sources kind of giving him that same info. And he's generally had very good sources at SIE, but really depends on the exact ties. I don't think he knows anybody directly at Santa Monica, but I don't want to speak for him. It's just that that's what he mentioned on the podcast. That made a lot of headlines this past week, which is kind of like in direct conflict with that prior rumor, right? It's like, okay, the next one's in Egypt. Now maybe it's going to go back to Greece. I don't know where you set on this.
Without spoiling anything that happens in Ragnarok, so it is kind of hard to think where they go with Kratos after Ragnarok, technically. Like in kind of how he's set up now afterwards. So it kind of makes sense to maybe do, I guess you could do a kind of a prequel or like you mentioned, a reboot or so. That's the thing. It is God of War is so popular for Sony, but it was almost drawn out to where Kratos, we'll say, might not be the main focus in the future. But to me, one of the reasons God of War is so popular is because of Kratos. So it's like, how do we keep Kratos kind of around and work through this franchise still? So maybe you're right, reboot, or just honestly go back in time and make him young again. And
Make him young again.
I mean, kind of. That's just it. The thing is, though, I feel like they'd have to change the gameplay up somewhat, as I mentioned before, if they're going to jump between mythologies again. And Egyptian would be interesting. But because that was also mentioned. So I'm not sure where they go with it, but God of War, I assume, has to continue for Sony just because of its popularity.
I mean, you would think, but
go back to the zoomed out, more like over the top action, gore, violence kind of style they had for God of War 1 through 3.
Well, I mean, if they did that, I feel like it would be like basically a remake, you know?
Yeah.
Like principally leave the sort of core gameplay loop intact and what you expect from those first 3 games with fixed camera points and it being sort of zoomed out. Like most of the game has like isometric viewpoints and things like that. So I would assume that's what they do. But this, I'll tell you that I don't know if I can really get on board with this, assuming it, and again, rumor, nothing about this is confirmed, obviously, but I don't know, like a young Kratos back to Greece. Like we've explored Greece like a lot, and a lot of those
the Egyptian idea.
Like a lot of these games are prequels, you know, it's like, I mean, hell, there's also Betrayal, which was on mobile phones. And that was like actual fucking mobile phones with
a number pad.
Yeah. With a number pad. That's what I was Yeah, so that's a prequel too. Like we've done like a lot of Grease. Like I don't know. I'm thinking like I would prefer them to maybe not do that. Like let's kick up a new mythos.
Yeah.
That's what I would prefer.
Do you see? I mean, they had talked about that. I thought Corey talked about the idea of Kratos and like kind of him going up through the sand and then coming out over the top and looking out over some ruins and stuff. And that was the plan for the Egyptian, I guess Egyptian exploration for that mythology in the game. I wouldn't mind them going that route. I think there'd be some really cool battles they could do with that. It's just, where do they place it? Is it older Kratos still? Like, is he getting even older now? It's like, I don't know how they, you know what they could do? They could video game it up and do the thing like where someone comes by and makes Kratos young for some reason. I don't know. Look, hey, I'm watching Dragon Ball Daima right now, and they made him young just because they wanted to relive GT, but make it canon. Okay, so they could, if they want it to happen, they can. Video game it up.
I suppose. The thing, like, I think if we're gonna get more God of War, which like you would expect we're going to, but at the same time, like Sony has never shied away from like putting down super successful franchises because the studio wants to do something else. Now we know Santa Monica is kicking up a new IP. We would hope in the short term, like somewhat soon, they'll be ready to show that game off, and then this other God of War thing is maybe much further behind. But it's like by the time they're ready to do more God of War, if you want to like sort of explore a reset for the franchise, how is the new mythos not the way to go? That's what would feel very new and fresh. And the entire point of Ragnarok being wrapped up in 2 games, the Norse mythology, is to not spend 10 years in Norse mythology. So you got to figure they're gonna go to a new one.
I think that makes sense.
Yeah, this young Kratos thing, it's a weird rumor. Not to say like Tom's wrong, but because he himself said he's not 100% sure on it. But I would hope that's not the direction they're taking.
Yeah, I think Egyptian makes sense. They wanted to do it. They talked about trying to do it before. It would be new, maybe interesting, I feel like. But they got to keep it as, I think, we're Kratos in still. I don't know. The Atreus thing, I don't know. You think that would work for a whole brand new $70 AAA or $70 AAA game?
I think if you're going to do Atreus, do a Lost Legacy style $40 sort of, but give it
like a spinoff.
I mean, how is that not like the most sort of viable way to sort of market test that character and the God of War name? Because you're right. How much association do people place on God of War with Kratos? But it's this, but can you do the same gameplay, a similar gameplay loop? But it is his son, which very much had the story that explained him off to be his own thing. So that's how I always pictured Atreus would get his own entry. But obviously that isn't likely what's going on, because that was like also a running theory with Blue Point for a while. So maybe they're doing the Atreus spinoff game. Like everybody thought that. Like everybody thought that's what they were doing. So that's not the case. Not the case. Let's move on to this rumor here. Fairgame's internally delayed to 2026. Giant Bomb's Jeff Grubb said during a recent Game S Decides episode that Fairgames won't release this year because, as far as he's aware, he's heard that it's been pushed to 2026. Very straightforward, just sort of internal chatter is what he's hearing. Considering there was never a year put on this game, like that would like internally delay. Sure, I didn't think this game was coming out this year. I'll say that. I know you were expecting to maybe hoping to see the game this year at some point, right, John?
I was thinking maybe that the Concord situation where we had Concord re-revealed and then it came out less than a half a year later or something. It was pretty quick from showing to release. Kind of thought Fairgames might go that same way. I don't know. The Fairgames thing, I'm flipping on it again. I don't know. It's not looking great to me with Fairgames.
It could though. I mean, what you're saying could still happen. Just like it wouldn't be this year. I didn't think we were seeing it this year. I mean, full disclosure, it always read to me as a 26 game. So it could still be that sort of, here's like another reveal for the game. Here's the actual gameplay, because we didn't actually get any gameplay for the goddamn thing. But here's the gameplay, and then you can play it in 3 months or something.
That's fair. Like they could show, technically we could have like a September show or state of play or something. Oh, here's Fairgames. It's out in February or March or something. It's like, oh, that's not that far into 2026. Okay. But confidence isn't high with this game for me right now, Ryan. I'm back and forth on this.
You
Okay,
you are, because you were I don't want to say championing it, but you were being very positive towards it.
I've thought more about this now after hearing this too, and apparently Sony. Well, but then like Sony apparently is like high on it too. They're like good on it. Like they're happy with what they're seeing is what the word is, and I'm like cool. But then you see that they were also high on Concord, and you're like, oh.
I don't know if that's totally fair though. You know how many games get internally pushed? Like that's not fair. Games get internally pushed all the time. So to hear this, I don't think that's bad news or indications of anything, because so many times like games have an internal target that we never hear about because it just comes out when it comes out and they're ready to say something. I always thought this was like a 26 game.
Maybe that's not a bad thing either though, Ryan, because what happened with the other two games that they clearly weren't confident with, that we found out from Bloomberg, they just canceled them. So the fact that Fairgames isn't canceled yet, maybe that is the positive side of things that's still on.
Oh yeah, that's what we were getting at before, right? It's like they canceled so many games, which that's, to me, that's always like the better of the two options, which is instead of releasing them to market and they fail and you have studio closures, like let's kill them. Let's do the sort of Sony method here, but try and apply it to live service games, kill the project, move on. In this case, you would think, okay, this thing's still happening, so that's got to mean something. But we all saw how that played out with Concord. So
they could also be very stubborn about it. Like, okay, we bought Firewalk and we bought Haven, both of which before they released their game. One of them has to work, and Firewalk didn't. So now Haven has to. It's Jade Raymond. She has to do something. Okay, she keeps going from company to company and just somehow winning out and moving on to the next one. Like Stadia for how many years? Nothing happened from that. They closed it down. I'm sure she got some kind of payout for it, and then opened Haven, and then Haven sold to Sony a year later.
Google's, I gotta be honest, is probably the big one to blame there. Come on,
it's incredible. Like, I don't know what I still need to know what the pitch was to Sony, other than I don't know if Sony was desperate for these live service games, this push. They're like, let's just collect a bunch of them, and they got to work. Some of them have to, because that was such a weird announcement for the acquisition. That and Firewalk were two weird ones. Like people always come back to that. Yeah,
but they weren't weird to me, because like they acquired all their partner studios. They always had this methodology for how they acquired studios. It had to be longstanding partners. So it's like, how do they go about it from that point on? Everyone's like, oh, acquire this well-known studio, this well-known publisher, because this was when Microsoft was going studio crazy. It's like they have never acquired studios like that. So what's the next path? Well, what was happening a lot during COVID was investing in new studios. So Sony did a very similar, like lateral-esque move that all these other places did, which was just betting on talent, betting on notoriety and names and startups. And that's kind of what the Firewalk and Haven thing was. They made sense to me. It's just clearly the actual product, in this case, Concord, was awful and didn't pan out all that well. Now, what can be said about Haven? The other aspect about Haven that's always overlooked too is that this team apparently made a lot of like cloud tools and technology, and Mark Cerny was heavily involved. So maybe there's a lot of that at play too. We haven't really heard much else outside of like that. I'm curious if like they still play maybe sort of a more vital technical role within SIE, kind of similar to like Naughty Dog's ICE team. Maybe there's some of that going on too.
That's true.
It's hard to say. Yeah. It's hard to say.
They tried to explain what the cloud technology stuff was, but I feel like they didn't do maybe that was on purpose. They're very vague about what exactly it was.
Yeah, some sort of like work from home tools that were, sort of vital back then. Although there's all these companies are wanting people to get back in the office, which I don't think SI is fully doing just yet. They still, for the most part, let all their teams sort of do a lot of remote work or leave that decision at the hands of the studios, I should say.
Right.
We do have another rumor for a live service game though, and that is Gummy Bears, the Bungie project that was spun off into its own PlayStation studio. So this was a report from Vandal. Okay, and the sources close to the Gummy Bear project apparently say the game was, one, going to be revealed at the State of Play. Now that didn't happen, but the other part of the rumor is that the game would be coming to PS5, PC, and Switch. I thought this was interesting. Now, again, the recap here, this is the MOBA team-based game that Bungie's had in incubation for a few years now at this point. Not super long, but It's apparently being described as a very colorful, lo-fi aesthetic type of game. It might also have a knockout system very similar to Smash Brothers. So it's maybe a bit more goofy looking in appearance or whatever the case is. But this report I found noteworthy just in that while the credibility for it already sort of doesn't line up, it's just an interesting proposition that like, oh, maybe this would be another viable Nintendo game. That, and the report also mentioned it was going to come out this year, which I don't think anybody would expect the game to come out this year. But then I thought to myself, like, well, wait a minute, maybe this might be something that Sony wants to start exploring, which is we've learned the hard truth with live service. If we put, 9 figures into a game and put it out as a polished product, that doesn't guarantee anything. Maybe we need to start going down this avenue that we don't normally do, which is this early access closed test and, some sort of like playable environment where the game still looks like a game, but it's like very, very early. And so I thought, you know what? These two things, very plausible in my head.
Let people basically help with the game as you're going along with feedback.
Shape it.
Yeah. Because whatever focus group testing they did for Concord, didn't work for them. And maybe you're right. Maybe they're reflecting on that. Like, hey, this game doesn't crash the systems. It works. Maybe we need help with how fast do you need the progression system to be, for example, or like what kind of menu system would they need for UI and stuff in front of them? And like, there's so many things you can just ask people about while they're playing it as long as they understanding that it's not, a full, in their case, a $40 game or a $70 game or something. Hey, this is a cheaper game. It's this early access thing. Help us build it. Right. Or as I'm sure some people are thinking, maybe like closed alpha or network test, or let's just throw it out there for a couple weeks. People can play it. Then we'll bring it back in and reflect on a lot of the feedback we get. Also, I'm not going to, which we haven't seen yet. I'm not going to claim victory on this one with the Switch release because I don't count it as like a Sony first party IP or anything yet. Like that's known. I was kind of thinking more like Horizon Zero Dawn, something like that. So that prediction, I'm not gonna claim victory on if this gets revealed as a Switch game.
Really, I would think that's completely fair game because this is now a PlayStation studio. It's spun off.
True. That's true. You know what? Here's how we'll decide. If when they show the game, if they have the PlayStation Studios thing come up at the beginning.
But here, I don't think they would do that if it is an early access thing. They don't want to give the appearance that it's a finished product. But like, it's very like, this is so noteworthy, right? Because if it was still like at Bungie, where the initial pledge of acquiring them was we're going to remain independent and still publish multi-platform games, they have this now like deniable out of like, well, this is a separate team. It's a PlayStation Studio developer. It's a new IP. There's no familiarity. And like a big surprise, it's not going to be an Xbox game, but it will. You'll put it on Switch. Yeah. I'd say I would say that's completely fair for you to be correct about that if it happens.
Okay. We'll see. I mean, it makes sense if it's somewhat Smash Brothers like to be like, yeah, it is on the Switch too. Why not? Let's see. I mean, you can kind of then get expectations as to the visuals and stuff for it. I guess you can also get expectation for it running really, really well on the PlayStation 5 then.
I wonder.
Version.
I'm curious to see what it looks like. I mean, like, I don't know. Again, the report kind of like falls apart when these sources got the state of play thing completely wrong. But like report aside, like I'm like those two things are super plausible in my head. So we'll see.
I'm kind of picturing that Fortnite aesthetic, to be honest.
You would think, but I don't know. It's like how much are they going to lean into that, especially saying it's like a lo-fi aesthetic,
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, maybe even like more cartoony than that, I guess.
I was picturing like what the fuck's it? Foam Stars. Kind of maybe looks a little bit like Foam Stars.
Sure. Yeah.
I don't know if that's really flattering or not, but maybe it'll look like that. You want to just move into the state of play? We got the state of play news. So all right, state of play, February 2025. This happened on Wednesday. Like we were thinking, Valentine's, the week, that week period, so 2 days before Valentine's Day. I'm not going to go over everything, but I feel like there was actually some pretty big things that were announced relative to third-party stuff, So they did open with Shinobi, Art of Vengeance, coming August 29th. How you feel about that, John?
Looks
Shinobi?
sick. Looks
It,
good.
it looks good. It does look cool.
I like the animation. It looks super fluid, the whole thing.
It reminds me a lot of like, I forget the name of it. It was like a PSN title from a while ago, but side scrolling, same art style, looked very pretty. And it kind of looked like it played the same too, but it's this Shinobi. So you're getting into a different can of worms on that one. There was also Borderlands 4, new trailer for that confirmed coming September 23rd. And they did also announce a special state of play for that game as well. That's being held this spring. We have not had like a game specific state of play in quite a while, if I remember correctly. I think the last one was Rebirth.
Yeah. The Borderlands one was interesting because like, oh, they're tying that to the PlayStation brand, like straight up.
Yeah. And what's funny too is like September 23rd, this is a Take-Two game. So that's them putting a release date on one of their own projects next to GTA 6. So I think the
GTA 6 will be coming out after this. They're not going to do GTA 6 before this.
Yeah.
So I still think they keep saying GTA 6 coming out this year. And I'm thinking
November, right? November?
After seeing Borderlands, I think it's November. That would only make sense for them. Although, wouldn't it be mayhem if they dropped it the first week of December?
That'd be nuts, dude. They'd have to print so many copies of that game. That game's gonna single-handedly like create a year-over-year spike for physical media.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's a big. Well, that's got to be like a big boon too for just other publishers though to like have this slight telegraph of like, oh, maybe we should try and get our game out before September.
Yep. Everybody in September. I don't know if Borderlands is like, I mean, I know it's fun. People like Borderlands. It's not the market mover that GTA 6 is. So it's like, oh, we could drop in September. That's fine.
We have Sonic Racing Cross Worlds coming to PS4 and PS5. Closed network test on February 21st, starting very soon. I don't know if you're into the Sonic Racing series. You play that Racing Transformed?
I've played him here and there. It's always so funny to me that Sonic races around in a car when he's faster than the car. Maybe it's like that thing where he just, I don't feel like walk to a grocery store, right? It's like I can just drive there. That's all. I try to make it make sense in my mind why I'm driving a car as Sonic.
Why are you trying to rationalize Sonic in a car?
It was just I am just curious who was like, I mean, I guess they were looking at Mario Kart or something. Like, oh yeah, let's make a Sonic racing game. And no one in the office is like, why would he drive a car? That's
not another response I was expecting from you. I have this meta commentary on why Sonic's got a driver's license.
I do. I do. I mean, I think it's a cool idea for it. It seems like it just changes, like almost like, I don't say it's a Ratchet and Clank kind of mechanic, but where it changes between worlds and stuff. I don't know if that's the first person through the portal changes the world for everyone, or if they actually have split worlds so you can go either side and it's two different tracks and two different worlds, but then it comes back together. I have no idea how that works.
All I know is people actually really liked Sonic Racing Transformed. I could never get into it, but I guess people are really excited about that. So you've got the closed network test very soon, which this too, like if you were a fan of this, people freaked out apparently. I didn't know till after, but Digimon Story Time Stranger confirmed for PS5 this year. Yeah, this kind of like came one for me.
Cadence? Hold on, what was that?
Huh?
Digimon Story. Time Stranger.
Time Stranger. Yep.
I think it's Story Time Stranger. You said Story.
Story Time Stranger? Story Time. What is it? Let me see. I didn't even get the name right.
Story Time Stranger. Is that how it is? I don't know if it's Story Time Stranger or Story.
Digimon Story Time Stranger.
How do we say it? Which way is right? Just so I know for the future.
I think it's Digimon Story Time Stranger.
Okay.
I might have spelled it in a weird way that made me think it was said in a different way.
Okay, that just
look.
It's not gonna be for some reason.
Hey, the point is Digimon's back, so I'm very happy for those that like that franchise.
I'm confused. What did you? You didn't play Survive then?
I couldn't tell you the first thing about Digimon. I really couldn't.
Okay. Yeah. What? Hold on. You were wading through all the Digimon cards, right, at the convention. You couldn't find the Yu-Gi-Oh cards. Digimon cards kept popping up.
No, Pokemon kept coming.
Was it Pokemon? I thought you were at one place and they're like, we got Digimon. You're like, why would you have Digimon?
Maybe one booth had that, but it's like if we're talking TCGs, like it's Pokemon, Magic, And then like you might be lucky to find like morsels of Yu-Gi-Oh sprinkled about. But like One Piece is getting bigger nowadays too. So One Piece is getting big. I'm sure Digimon does crop up here and there. But like if we're talking games, I don't know nothing about the games.
Okay.
This apparently was now announced like a while ago and it came back. So it was like a big thing for Digimon fans. I'm happy for them. I'll
Well,
always be
Cyber
happy
Sleuth
for you.
kind of like a JRPG, like a turn-based JRPG monster raising game. So
Mm.
I don't know if this is more like that. Survive was this weird strategy RTS visual novel thing. It just didn't. I tried it and I was like, this isn't gonna work.
Well, it sounds like you know what you're talking about here. You big Digimon household over there?
I mean, I back when it first hit the PlayStation, the PS1, Digimon World, we were watching Digimon.
Well, I think I did play that. I might have rented it from like a Blockbuster. The only thing I remember about that game is that like one of the Digimon could actually shit, and you'd see like a
Yep.
little poop on the ground. That dude,
Yep. It was kind of leading into the Tamagotchi stuff back then.
well, like I'm not lying to you. That's the only memory I have of that game
Really?
is like digital poop on the ground, and I'm like, oh my god, I can't believe you can do that in this game. That's all. That's all I remember.
I think that's a game a lot of people remember fondly, but then if they would go back and play it now, they'd go, "Oh man, this is rough. It's
Probably.
not aged well." But that said, I think if they announced that was coming back to the PlayStation Premium like Classics collection, like I think that'd be awesome to randomly see that get announced. That said, yeah, back then I played that, as you mentioned, just kind of like on and off, renting when you could, sort of thing. I think a friend of mine actually had it. But it was that, and then Monster Rancher, the game where you change the disc out and you could get it. Those are the two I remember on the PS1 that were at least somewhat big. Not Pokemon big, but they were notable.
Okay.
But Digimon's just doing all kinds of. They try a lot of different gameplay angles. I think Cyber Sleuth is some of their better recent ones because that's just more in line with a turn-based RPG. I think that's what this is going to be more like. We'll see. They're going to have more info on March 20th at Digimon Con.
Oh wow, you had this on lock. Okay,
Gotcha covered.
I apologize, Digimon fans. I got the name of your game wrong. Next up, Supermassive announced Directive 8020, which is like a new sci-fi aliens-like entry in the Dark Picture series. Guess we got more of that going on. Five Nights at Freddy's Secret of the Mimic coming to PS5 June 13th. I almost was just like, yeah, this is not a big announcement, but really that's just me also being like super naive and dumb again, because Five Nights is like huge. Every time like Sony has a trailer for this franchise, it's the number one trailer that's uploaded on their channel. It's so many eyes are on that franchise, and this
You're not up to date on the Five Nights at Freddy lore, Ryan?
can't say I am. I mean, it's like the trailer popped up, and I'm just sitting there going like, oh yeah, it's another Five Nights game. It's kind of like whatever to me, but then like sure enough, this thing just like catapults social media, and it's like the biggest trailer that was announced at the State of Play. So it's like you can't ignore it. Not for me, but you can't ignore it.
Every now and then a game like this pops up that makes me realize that we're old and out of touch.
We just don't get it. But it is I guess like was this like the actual announcement for it? Like this was the first time they showed this thing?
I think so.
Yeah, that's
maybe.
what I'm like, I don't know if it was like already said before and here's the trailer, but it's coming this summer. Onimusha 2 PS4 remaster coming in May, and that trailer was also right next to Onimusha Way of the Sword gameplay, which that game's looking pretty tight. Like that a lot. Yeah.
Looking good. It's definitely like an earlier build of it from where like it looks good. It looks like it's going to use some polishing over the next year or so, but I think the core gameplay and what they're showing is like, okay, this is Onimusha. I'm excited for it. The second one, it'll be cool to get that remaster. I'll go through it on the PS5 backwards compatible PS4. I did notice though, you're right.
I was just say, I included that because I want to say there are still some times where like it's a conscious choice of like, no, it's just a PS4 version. You can play it on PS5.
I think that's still like their framework. What is that?
Yeah, it's like I don't think they do this for any of their like older re-releases, right? It's always exclusively PlayStation 4 stuff, right?
Yeah.
There was like a technical reason for that, was there not?
I thought so. I think that what the Capcom Fighting Collection 2 is doing that as well, where it's for PS4.
Yeah, it's all like all that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Either way, it'll work. I mean, it's a PS2 game that's getting the upscale technique. it's still going to look like a PS2 game either way. So
Indeed it will. And we did see the leaked trailer, which was MGS Delta getting a release date. So kind of saw that coming, but we did get to see it in 4K glory and the Snake versus Monkey mode back in there as well. Xbox not getting that. You're not allowed to have Ape Escape on that hardware apparently. So it's going to be Snake versus Bomberman.
That's funny. The Bomberman one's actually pretty funny that I have that.
That's appropriate. It's just so funny how it's like clearly PlayStation is one, but like there's just no bones being thrown here. It's like, no, you're not getting our monkeys.
Nope.
Come up with something else for them. And Konami's just like, shit. Open the treasure box.
At least Konami's willing to use them.
Well, but you can still do it on PC. Snake versus Monkey mode's on the PC version, so you can do that. That and PlayStation 5. Hell Is Us, a release date trailer that's coming out September 4th. I think that also showed up like right before the State of Play as well. And then this was actually kind of a sleeper announcement. Tides of Annihilation. This was shown off as well. Completely new game announced, which the following day, 11 minutes of gameplay showed up on IGN and things like that. So this game kind of came out of nowhere, but everyone's like, whoa, this looks kind of boss. Looks good. It's a nice game.
Like an action game. I kind of also wonder if a lot of people were kind of getting, I'll say bored, but very used to the Souls games always popping up. This is kind of like, okay, it's just an action game.
It just looks like an action game.
Yeah, it's weird that because back in the day it was just we're just completely used to action games always popping up. It almost feels like, oh wow, they're not trying to do the Souls thing. Okay, cool. It's a Ninja Gaiden 2 shows up. Oh cool, it's not a Souls game. It's an action game. Ninja Gaiden 4, same thing. Tides of Annihilation. You're right though, kind of out of nowhere. I didn't hear anything about it before. No rumors, nothing going around. It's like looks cool. Looks interesting.
It looks very interesting. And on the flip side, this game apparently did not look that interesting, which is Mind's Eye. So we had gameplay for this title show up as well. That's from the new studio formed by the former production person at it was Rockstar North, Leslie Benzies. So it's their studio's new game. And like I'm watching the trailer, I'm like, okay, this is kind of fine. I see the trailer on YouTube and like I'm seeing the conversation with this game on Reddit and Twitter, and people are kind of like, this. Something about this game looks kind of bland and just maybe boring. I don't know. Like, what'd you think of it?
I think I think the game looks like it's going to be like that high. They're going to attempt that high production kind of value. And what I have to assume is a fraction of the budget that was being worked with at Rockstar originally, and what the resources they were able to tap there. With something like Mind's Eye, I mean, it's kind of. It's maybe it's because it's sort of like, been there, done that kind of thing with the out of control robots and the AI. And I mean, I thought it looked interesting, but it wasn't enough to be like, oh wow, this looks incredible. How are they even doing this? It looks fine.
It looks samey to me is kind of maybe the vibe.
That's what I mean. It's like, this looks kind of like iRobot or the AI is out of control, or maybe a more modern grounded version of like Detroit Become Humans kind of premise with like, androids and stuff, but these ones are going rogue and fight. Again, it feels like they're pulling from stories and tropes that we've already seen played out many times.
I didn't notice it at first, but I saw a comment say like, oh my God, how many times can they show a different way to blow up a car? And then I watched the trailer again and I'm like, oh yeah, it's a lot of like, check this out. Boom.
I feel like maybe that's just there's a chance this game comes out and it's not at all what we're expecting because they decided to show, as you mentioned, all the car explosion scenes at once. So I don't know if maybe it is a lot of car chases or like on foot behind cover third person action. Maybe all of a sudden it comes out and it's like, this is kind of like a detective game too. So it's crazy like that. That's what I mean. We could be having entire sections of the game left out just so they can get their 2-minute gameplay showing in there real quick, scrunch it together. So I almost wonder if this is a game that isn't going to show great the first time, but maybe as they get more chance to show it, it kind of fleshes out a bit.
Well, I would agree with most. It didn't seem like a good showing. So let's hope that you're on the right track, there with maybe there's just more they're not showing. I'll tell you this though, unironically, one of the bigger announcements for me was Darwin's Paradox. which was that puzzle platforming octopus game from
Oh
Konami.
gosh,
Dude, that looked cool. Did that look cool? That
did
looked
it?
cool.
I
Yeah,
mean,
I
it was
like
an
that.
octopus. I don't know.
I like octopus. They're cool. I don't know. I saw that and I'm like, yo, this is my shit right here. This looked
The
really
stealth
cool.
game, stealth octopus game.
I don't know. I like, maybe it's because I'm like I like aquatic stuff. I like fish tanks and fish keeping, and I like octopus. They're cool. So I was like, oh, this is some shit. This is fire. Okay, to frame it in the same way, like when I watched the first trailer for Stray, I'm like, oh hell yeah. Like I'm sold. Let me play as an octopus.
Do you have a fish tank?
You know what's funny? Not now. At my peak at the hobby, I had 5 tanks going in my house.
Wow, 5, 10. What in the world? And like one in every room or something?
I was big into the fish keeping hobby. Yeah, it's just one of those things. If somebody has fish, they kind of know what it's like. You know, you just sort of like you fall into the deep end. You get like a 10-gallon starter tank, and then you get a bigger tank, and you get bigger fish, and then you want to get aggressive species. And I was completely into that for a long time.
Aggressive species.
Well, like fish that aren't considered community fish, you know, so you could start keeping certain species that like are kind of only good by themselves in the tank. That's a thing. Yeah. Well, you can
you never got your octopus?
They're hard to keep. You can get them. You can absolutely get them. The thing is, the concern with like buying a real octopus and like keeping it as a pet is you have to seal the tank and make sure there's no way it can get out, because octopus love to just like leave. Like they'll just because they have tentacles, the suction cups, like they'll just leave the tank. So you have to like you have to seal it and make sure they can't get out. Otherwise, you're going to be walking down your hallway without noticing it.
Ah, there you go. Okay.
Yeah. A little bit of Ryan lore for you. We have Lost Soul Aside, the China Hero project. This game finally has a confirmed date coming May 30th for PS5 and PC. This one's been going for a little bit now. I think we were all waiting for this release date. Yeah, a long time. Then it went through their program, and it looks like they got whatever they needed to get, and now it's going to come out, getting a disc print too. So that is good news. Happy to see this game finally get a trailer.
It started as like a one person developing it, and I guess they scaled up as they got more funding, and then the China Hero project came in.
Yep.
Yeah. Hey, I like it. Still looks like, I mean, it looks like a Devil May Cry kind of game, over the top action. And you know, that's something I noticed about this show and maybe other shows that have been the last, I don't know, half a year. You're seeing more and more of those over the top action games. While I mentioned the Souls stuff is getting kind of repetitive. A lot of these kind of action games did pop up in this show, even where people were saying, oh, it's starting to all kind of, I don't say blend together, but look kind of samey at times. This one, though, I think stood out because it was very imaginative with things like the traversal, where the person's like surfing through like just kind of creating the ground as they're surfing around, stuff like that. So looks like it'll be, I mean, Tides of Annihilation look cool. This one looks like it's going to be maybe slightly higher in terms of production value and stuff.
The thing I always kind of think about is like the general color palette for the game. It can stand out a lot more if you can just sort of easily think about like, when we're talking about like the trailer, for example, like how many sort of environments do you see that are a bit more colorful versus your typical dark, gritty looking environments? So whether like it's a Souls-like or an action game, if they all have that general appearance where it's not as there's a word for it, but something where your mind sort of places that imagery with, you associate it with like, oh, I remember X, Y, and Z game because of the way it looked. Lost Soul aside, for whatever reason, like I think it's presented quite nicely the past few trailers to where it just sort of stands out amongst all those other games, if that makes sense. So we had that. We have the 2 other PS Studio announcements there, though. So we'll get into this, right? So we have Days Gone Remastered, announced, confirmed, coming April 25th for PS5. Over on the PS blog, they just kind of, announced all the typical bells and whistles for the remasters that they do. So improved graphics, Tempest 3D audio, DualSense support, VRR quality and performance modes, new accessibility options. They look very similar to like what we saw in other recent PS Studio games, so that you've got that like high contrast, like blind mode you can do for the game and things like that. There's new content too. So you've got the Horde Assault Arcade Survival mode, a permadeath mode, a speedrun mode, an enhanced photo mode, and there will be a $10 upgrade from PS4 to PS5. However, that does not include PS Plus redemptions, which is a different way that they approach this with, say, Horizon Zero Dawn Remastered, where they were actually honoring the Play at Home initiative. In this case, no, you have to have some copy of the game via disc or digital. And for the PC version, they're going to package all those new modes in a separate Broken Road DLC. That will also be $10. And it appears as though this game is going to be digital only. They're not going to print it on disc, at least for the time being. That's what it seems like, which is a damn shame.
You're not getting your PS5 box.
I can't get a white label on my box. Son of a bitch.
You're getting your PS5. That's too bad.
Yeah.
You saw the reaction to this, Ryan.
I mean, how could you not?
People actually bust out laughing on stream and stuff over this.
This was it was rumored though, so we like already knew it was on the way. But what's interesting is that like most of it was like obviously that the laughing, the oh my god, another remaster. If you look at Days Gone fans, they were like super pumped. They're like, oh my god, like
okay,
cool.
I think I know why they're pumped. By the way, Ryan, because I was like, you know what? I think they are like you're right. I did see it. I saw people online who were like, finally. And then I saw what their statement was following that. And I'm like, okay, I don't think they're excited for, maybe they're like, oh, cool, I'll go through Days Gone again. I think they're excited at the idea that what this means is a chance for them to prove that there should be a Days Gone 2. In my mind, I'm like, guys, I feel like we've been through this a few times now. We've heard different angles to the story of why there isn't a Days Gone 2.
And
I don't think the remaster selling, however, is going to really affect things much. Personally, exactly. I don't think it's going to be like, oh, well, here comes Days Gone 2 because remaster topped the charts. It's like, even if that did happen, guys, it's a PS6 game.
Well, I think that's the other weird angle is that I know fans want the sequel, but it's like, how many times can the story be said where like Sony never rejected it. The Days Gone 2 pitch never even left Bend. It was a Bend decision to not do Days Gone 2, which is a very brief recap there. But it's just like, that's like the other side of it is like, there was actually genuine excitement for like this release. And it's funny too, like you mentioned, like, oh, even if it tops the charts, which actually it seems like on PSN, it actually is quite high for the pre-orders. Like it climbed initially, which is, I don't want to say super surprising, but I guess surprising enough. But yeah, another remaster.
Let me ask you this, Ryan. Do you think the reception for this would have been slightly different, or even for a lot of these remasters, if they didn't use the word remaster? Like, if they come out with the Days Gone director's cut or just something else that doesn't say Days Gone, like we're remastering this, not even 6-year-old game or whatever. Like if it was called something other than Days Gone Remastered, do you think that would have been less of people breaking out laughing online and stuff like that?
I don't know. It's weird. Like they only used the director's cut name like two, 3 times. It wasn't, they didn't do it. And they only did it in the first year of the console, which it's like, that's sort of to me, that was like the safe window of like, if you're going to do a lot of ports, I mean, they're basically ports, you know?
Yeah.
Cause you're never going to like port over a game on like newer hardware and not spruce it up a bit, which is kind of what they're doing with all these games. Some seem to get more attention than others. I mean, I would argue this game is getting more attention than say, Ghost of Tsushima's director's cut. Now, if you remember that, like, I still find like that was sort of, I don't know, like egregious in my eyes. Like they didn't do anything to that game on PS5. It's like damn near similar. It's the same game on PlayStation 5. Now they like launched it with like that new content, the Iki Island expansion. But
Iki Island.
Yeah, but like it's still, I don't know. That one to me,
they were able to do the cutscenes in real time, so the lip sync matched up as well.
Yeah, like there was like very minor things, but I don't know. Maybe we're just splitting hairs. I still find like that was maybe the window to do it, which is the expectation of like new console. Here's all those late life cycle PS4 games. Now they're getting PS5 versions, which was not at all unusual for like many other prior console cycles, like even well before PS4 in that case, right? I mean, ports happen. You get the new spruced up version on the new console, and so that's like kind of a window where it's, you know, you're sort of avoiding that criticism. The deeper into the life cycle you do it, obviously, you're going to have this sort of reception. I don't know if there was any way to like announce the game and not have this sort of core audience that's like yelling at the game. Obviously, like what do? Do you do a PlayStation blog announcement? Nope, that's going to go bad. Do you? I mean, what do you? There's no way to do it. People are gonna complain about it. Here's the thing, though, right? So, because the thing with remasters, in a lot of cases for certain studios, it's simply like an onboarding project. Sometimes you have new hires do this if the studio has a proprietary engine or something. It's a game they can work on. Usually it's a smaller amount of staff or a smaller team that can do these things next to the studio ramping up like a main production. Like this is not something where Ben was tied up doing only this. We know they had another game going on that was canceled. So when we frame it like that, I'm curious where Ben is now, because clearly there were some staff doing this. And the idea was that they would ship this and production would ramp up on what was that live service new IP they were doing. But we know that's canceled and this is almost out.
Yes.
You've got Ben at like 130, 40 something staff, and we know they're not going to be closed, but that's a lot of people that will not be able to, I don't want to say not be able to, but like you don't need 130 people to make a brand new game initially. It's a few people that are in that concept stage. And that's just how studio hierarchies go when they're like 100 plus people. You've got, some handling, let's say, patches for the last thing they shipped. You've got some doing maybe a remaster or a port. Maybe they're taking on other work from a partner studio. And then you've got the handful of other people that are ramping up the next thing. And then more people will funnel into that project as it goes into, let's say, full production. The point is, they're now in a place where this remaster is done. Their last game was canceled. So what is Ben going to be doing? You know what I mean?
I think now if they can kind of come back to the table and think about it, this might be the time to make that move on Days Gone 2.
Oh, so you think they should just jump into a sequel?
I feel like they tried the live service thing. They already have knowledge of, like, they're not going back and restarting and setting up a new lore, new world, new character. I mean, they're gonna make new characters, I assume, for if they make a follow-up, but like they have a character, right? The main character already set up. The game did sell 9 million copies now, we believe, with the PC version added, and probably more than that. Like, there's at least brand awareness around this. And while the game came out buggy, and I understand there were issues with reviews, and like Sony does have this thing about, what's the view of the quality for the game? What's the review scores? I get it. That's all there. I kind of feel like maybe if Ben Studio comes back to the table, talks it out and goes, you know what, let's take a shot at Days Gone 2. That might be their best path forward. Cause I mean, we don't know what Sony would have done if they would have greenlit it or not, but after a live service game being canceled, it might be a better idea to pitch something a bit safer, which might be Days Gone 2 then.
I mean, I would say it's maybe a lot more plausible than it was before. Because like that's the missing it's not missing, but for a lot of people, the missing context is, they chose not to do a sequel to Days Gone, but it's like, given the position they're in, do they now feel a lot more comfortable with the IP and it feels like a safer bet to pitch to Sony, and then they want to go forward with it? Which in that case too, I mean, I don't want to say they could get it off the ground super fast, but they'd certainly have a general idea of where they're going versus, say, a completely new property. But even in that case, right, whether it's a new IP or Days Gone 2, you still have a lot of staff that aren't doing anything. So I'm curious as to what most of that staff would be doing.
Maybe remaster something else.
Well, that's the thing. They might help with another partner studio, or maybe they'll take on some sort of a project that SIE wants done. I don't know.
That's the thing, though. Ben was like, we don't want to be a support studio.
Well, no, but like you have to. I mean, at that point, it's just being mindful of like the jobs.
Yeah,
you're not going to lay off. You don't want to lay off 60 people. Give them something to do. Like, I know people hate hearing this, but it's like honestly, Ben was probably in a position of we need to do something. Like it makes money for the studio too. Like it gives people something to do. And I hate having to like defend another remaster, but like it's just to frame why it happened. That's probably what took place.
I'm gonna play it when it comes out, Ryan. I'm gonna give it another chance. Okay. I have the game on PS4. I'll drop the 10 and I'll give it another chance with the
Okay.
remaster. Okay? Maybe they would do well right now to help with let's see, with Sony Santa Monica, Intergalactic. Maybe you go and help. We're about to talk about Housemark. Just you're right. Maybe just accelerate development of one of those other games. Just if they're not doing anything, and the other side is in the conceptual early stages of a Days Gone 2.
Maybe
That might be a bad idea.
I would not. Maybe it could even be something where SIE does kind of like put the hammer down on them and does assign them to something, which people always think that is what happens when it's like, that's always a big misnomer. Like the studios kind of, they pitch things to Sony. They come up with their own things and, hey, could you get behind this? Sony doesn't always approach these teams saying, you're doing this, you're doing that. They have certain things they like to hear, but maybe this is a case where SIE does step in and, say, okay, you guys haven't done anything for how long? And, here's what we need done. And maybe that would play out. I don't know.
Yeah, it's like, hey, we want Intergalactic for second half of 2026. You guys get over there and help out. Let's get it done.
Something. I want to make sure that also, like, I don't want Ben to get hit with layoffs or have the studio closed. So yeah, give him something to do. It just sucks that it just sucks.
Days Gone 2. Days Gone 2.
It's just going to be such a long time till they have their own thing again.
Yep.
All right, well, let's move on to the best announcement. Housemarque announces Saros. So it was a trailer to end off the state of play. It was cinematic. Obviously I was excited. I'll always admit I prefer gameplay trailers. So it sucks that it was only a cinematic, but they did announce their new IP. So the details here, it's still going to be a gameplay first experience. They just want Returnal to stand on its own. So it's, why are they not doing a Returnal 2? Because it looks like Returnal to a degree. People are watching the trailer and you see a guy get up. He's got a gun. He looks like he's wearing a sort of Astra spacesuit to a degree. So people are like, Returnal 2? They see Saros. So they just explained that they want Returnal to stand on its own, but they want to capitalize on that gameplay first experience and make a new IP here. So the story is about Arjun Devraj, played by Rahul Kohli, where he's a powerful Soltari enforcer who is looking for someone on the off-world planet Karakosa under an ominous eclipse. That's the story synopsis. But the only other thing they're saying about this game is that there's a key gameplay distinction between this and Returnal, which is upgrades and progression. So there is going to be more progression and sort of permanent unlocks that happen in between runs, which was for a lot of people a problem with Returnal. The other thing they said during the trailer is that gameplay is coming later this year and the game is coming out next year.
Shout out to Housemarque.
Shout out
again. It's a W for the predictions already. Look at that. Housemarque coming through.
I didn't think we were seeing this game. I mean, in fairness, they shipped Returnal in 2021. They did content, the Tower of Ascension the following year. So it's like, yeah, I could see them turn around something within the time that we're seeing now, but something was telling me like we just weren't going to see it this year.
Housemarque's they're reliable studio for Sony now. They're turning in some quality releases. Well, we don't know about this game yet, but like we can assume at this point that it's good. It's up their wheelhouse. They're not doing the part of the relief here, Ryan, for me, is that we now know that Housemarque didn't attempt a live service game.
No, well, I didn't think they would. I mean that. You almost made me a little nervous there. I'm like, oh God, please don't. But it does appear to be like their same sort of core formula, which is bullet hell action, and
you're good at it, you stick with it.
Yeah,
that's how you do it. I don't know why it became so weird for these companies. It's like, man, we're really good at remaking games. Let's make a multiplayer God of War. It's like, why? What are you doing? Why do that? Housemarque is like, man, we're really good. And you say these bullet hell now 3D action platforming almost at times shooters. Let's do that again. Except this time, let's, as you mentioned, do more permanent progression-based upgrades, which is very, very popular, by the way. And that is the thing. So I don't want to say Returnal sold bad. It didn't. Did it sell incredible? That was wasn't like this first House Mark. It was right. It was like their best selling game and stuff. Awesome, but there's so much left, so much left on the table there. If they did say do something like what we see with Hades, where it's like, oh yeah, okay, it's there's more of a progression system as you continue to upgrade your character through the different runs.
Are you implying that if it had a better progression system, that would have directly led to a lot more sales for the game?
I think there is a perception of the game, and it's not incorrect, that the game is just brutally difficult, and at times you feel like you waste a lot of your time when you play it. Like there are times where I'm playing and I'm like that last bullet hits you and you're like, I feel like I just wasted an hour of my time.
Well, so that's the thing, right? Like, and it's fair. A lot of comparisons are to Hades, and Hades does very much have that tangible, like, oh, I just died, but now I can't wait to spend I can't even remember what it was, but I can't wait to spend all my stuff in this room, that room right before the run begins. And you have that tangible, like, I've got more health. I've got more of this. I can do this now. Whereas Returnal was very atypical in that it does have permanent unlocks, but they're mostly key items. The big thing was like gun augments, or like the key traits on guns. Like that's really how you like get farther in Returnal, is like the basic pistol you get, it only shoots, a few rounds, and that's it. You get those additional key traits where you get portal beam and multi-fire. And so once you start unlocking those, which those are permanent, then your gun has like way more firing power. That's kind of why when you do Returnal a few times, like let's say you do the first 3 planets a few times over and over again, that's why like the first time you fight Frike, the first boss, it'll take a while to beat him. Just the sheer health you can see, it takes a while to go down. Mm-hmm. You put 50 hours from Returnal, he goes down like a standard enemy at that point. It's the guns are where the upgrades happen, but people don't tend to feel that in Returnal, I find.
No, it's not as upfront to you with that. So like you mentioned, like with Hades, you'll go back and they'll be like, yo, I know you just died, but check this out. And they throw all these stats at you. Yeah. It's like every time you die, you come back here, you spend it. It's just, it's more impactful, I feel like, and people can see it easier. Mm-hmm. So there is that sense of, I don't waste my time when I play this game. Whereas I think people did play Returnal, or even were told about Returnal, and they're like, I don't really want a game where I'm basically, palm sweating at night trying to play this thing after work. It's like Hades does have kind of that casual kind of feel to it, So I think they can still keep a difficult game like this, but it will become easier by brute forcing it, playing it over and over and over again, and eventually your character's strong enough. I think this could be a huge jumping off point for Housemarque with this game if they do it right.
100%. So that's for me. This is what I think with the sales for the first. Well, I say first game. It's just Returnal. Comes out the first year PS5 is available. The install base is only so big. People can't buy PlayStation 5s. This is also a new IP from I say unfamiliar studio. Most people don't know Housemarque. Like,
who's out there playing Resogun? Let's be real. I mean, like it's not like that. Man, you remember when we were playing Resogun back in the day? That just never happens.
I know. Like that's exactly right. It's like they were around for a while. I've loved them since Super Stardust HD on PS3. Like I love their chaotic bullet hell action arcade style gameplay first games. And that's what was so cool about Returnal, is that they scaled up in a really big way, had a larger budget, wove a story and a really interesting narrative into what was still a super gameplay ass video game. Like I love the way that Maximilian Dude described Returnal, which was, this is a video game ass video game. It feels so kinetic and fun and fast paced. They made that transition beautifully. So I was so happy for them with that game. But it's like after that, right now there's like way more eyes on the studio than before. And there's way more PS5s out there. So I think there's going to be a lot more attention on this game, and they're taking that opportunity, or they're recognizing that, like, okay, let's acknowledge some of those issues with Returnal that were maybe barriers of entry for that game, and let's make sure people can get a lot more mileage out of the game, similar to Hades, and they maybe want that same liftoff that Hades had.
Yeah, I mean, the game can still be difficult, can still be really fun, but I don't want to say casualize it, but make it not that what do people say, the get good game, where it's, look, I don't know what to tell you. You're just gonna have to get good at this game. I don't know what to say. Like, that's it, right? So I mean, it does happen. You either need to get a better roll or get better artifacts, or as you mentioned, just work to try to level up the traits for the guns. But a lot of it does come down to how lucky was your roll when you walked into that room and you got this artifact that, like, for example, one run recently I did, it was like I got an artifact that was like, hey, all those integrity upgrades that you do, the effects doubled. And it's like, oh, so I end up getting, like,
That's
towards
huge.
the end of the game, my health bar is twice the size. And I'm like, yeah, okay, this is easy. Sure. So, but in the run where I don't get that, and instead I get a parasite that's like, hey, you get twice as many of the obolite things, but every time you pick up an item, you get hurt. It's like, well, I'm not going to pick that up. It was in the same room, right? It's like, well, I'm not taking that with me. So yeah, it does come down at times to, what you find. So I am very interested. And also, I mean, the boss they showed there looked cool. Like, it looked awesome. It looked like it was going to be this massive world breaking boss you're about to fight. And the Eclipse, like the whole art style and vibe of it does kind of feel like that, almost like that apocalyptic kind of thing. I don't know. This is cool. And you were all over Twitter, by the way, because of your reaction, because they showed you losing your mind when they zoomed in and the pattern of the projectiles came out of the eye that you see in the pupil.
Was that? Oh, was I?
Yeah, you were jumping all over the place.
Well, I know what I did, but I'm saying I was on Twitter for that. I hardly even use Twitter.
Their favorite reaction.
Oh, okay, interesting. Well, I was, though. I mean, that some people like called it just off the dialogue. I don't know. The dialogue, I was starting to think, like, is this Housemarque's next game? And then, but the second the bullet hell showed up, right? Everyone remembers that basically a goddamn laser light show, which is what Returnal is. You're basically in a European nightclub at night playing that game. It's insane how many things are coming at you. But I lost my shit. I love that studio and I love Returnal, so I can't wait. I will say this. I do hope the runs are maybe shorter. Returnal's long. Like a run's multiple hours. And like, again, the Hades comparison, Hades really nailed that sort of roguelike sweet spot of, like, even if you finish a run in Hades, it's like 20 minutes. That's finishing it. If you die, it's like less than that. This, it's really long. So
they could probably have checkpoints set up too, where you can go back to the beginning or something after you beat a certain boss, or like they can make it so you go back to hub world, upgrade, come back. Like, they can, again, I don't want to say casualize, but they can make it a bit more convenient at times for people who don't have 2 to 3 hours sit down and maybe get something out of the run. It's always like a maybe, you know what I mean? So that's good. Returnal's good. I like the game a lot, but I do see the hiccups for people who like the things that come up where they're like, I would like to play it if I was in college and I had more time, or something like that. Like, that always comes up. Whereas there are a lot of people right now who are looking for the quick instant gratification runs that they can get out of it.
I'm hoping they address a lot of those things, and it will still have a plot line too, which I think Returnal's plot was really interesting. So I do want to, because this trailer already like laid down a lot of groundwork for some of the imagery they're using with the Eclipse, and there's already a lot of pieces that people are picking apart. So I'm so on board with this.
We don't know how many. What was the last number they reported for Returnal for sales?
I don't think the official number was only the first ever number they gave was 600,000.
Whenever I talk to people, I was just talking to MVG and Nate the other night. We were playing Call of Duty, and we were like, "Well, what would you say are your favorite PS5 only games?" And I was like, "Well, to be fair, PS5 only, like, the list is already kind of shorter if it's not on PC and stuff. We're going that route." But a Returnal came up for everyone. I was like, "Yeah, Returnal, obviously." It's like, man, everyone I talk to, Returnal is always like their favorite PS5 game, or like their top 2 or 3. Always Returnal. So it's just weird to me that we haven't even heard about, oh yeah, it's sold 1 million copies. I'm sure it has by now. It's just interesting that Sony hasn't really, I don't know, championed a bit more, got behind it. It's just a good game. So,
well, it's like, arguably they do that with everything. Like it comes out, and then that's kind of it. You don't really do anything else with it. I mean, the game's not an extra, so I mean, if you've got Plus, like a lot of people have had concurrent concurrent access to it since mid 2022. So I would assume at that point it's more of a, you know how Microsoft does this, where it's like we had so many players on this game, and it's like not a sold number, but it's like this is how many people played it. So I'm sure that
deaths have there been in Returnal. Let's put that number out there.
Probably a lot. I feel bad for like when I see posts of like they're like, oh, I tried Returnal. I know everyone said to play it. They're like, I can't get to the first boss. Like it just doesn't click for some people.
Yeah,
it happens. It happens. All right. Well, the state of play. I don't know any commentary here as far as like, oh, another state of play and it's absolute trash. F Sony. Why did this thing?
Saw that a lot online. People are very underwhelmed by this.
Not giving it. I thought it was good. I mean, this is pretty decent, I'd say.
The state of play. I mean, look, it just comes down to when I see state of play. What am I supposed to expect compared to Showcase? Like we don't get Showcase very often, do we?
Well, we haven't had one in a while now.
Yeah.
I mean, I think with the Showcase name, there's always the expectation of like multiple first party announcements. I would think. But you know, we've had some state of plays now that arguably were better than that 2023 one.
Yeah.
So
it's just, I think people are still looking for that Sony blowout where you find out what every single studio is doing.
They're looking for an E3 2015 or 2016. It's like it's a high
Horizon Zero Dawn, that God of War, like everywhere you're looking, it's crazy. It's just, I mean, look, we know Sony had their struggles with live service stuff. We know like Blue Point's not showing up or Bend, and maybe those would have been cool announcements to put next to the next God of War thing that's been rumors. So you do eventually get there. This just doesn't feel like the generation that's going to ever have that show, or won't have it till the end maybe, or it's just Sony's gone through an interesting run this generation, and it's just, I don't think it's going to culminate in one of those E3 2016 shows for a while.
I will always remind people that this company, for whatever reason, has really spread their announcements thin, as in like they've had plenty of things to say like all the time. If you bundle up like all these PlayStation blog announcements, that it's like, why was that not on a showcase?
Right.
If you bundle up the SGF stuff, the things they give Jeff Keighley for some godforsaken reason, like they could very easily condense a lot of things into one show and get better reception from it. But they like the following day they announced those Astro Bot levels. That could have
been a good one.
Like it's consistently lost on people that they very well could do these things. I find. With every state of play, I'm finding it harder and harder to humor this talk of like, oh man, that show is ass. It's like, well, it seems like it's always ass. It's just, are we really always chasing that 2016 high? Like they could either like blow their load on one show and then they have nothing to say for another 2 years, or they could spread it a little thin. You're not going to please everybody. The way I always describe it is, you know, for most people, it's like you're looking for one or two things out of these shows. Everyone's got their own favorite games or IP or studios. If you get that one game, you're happy. Like I was happy with this one. I got Saros. I'm happy. I got that and an octopus. It's a W in my book.
You think if Intergalactic wasn't at the Game Awards and instead it was an announcement here, like let's say they open the show with Saros, and they close with Intergalactic. And you're like, okay, you have two, I'll even say for Housemarque, because I think they are getting to that level, two big, highly anticipated Sony first-party games to sandwich the entire event. And you got Days Gone remastered right in the middle to keep everything balanced, you know? So would that have just been better, you think, for a lot of people? Rather than give that one to Jeff Keighley, you move it up to the show.
Do that. Put the Astro Bot thing. I mean, if they condense it, I'm sure the reception would go over a little bit better. But here's the thing. They could do all that stuff and they still can't really control what the sort of hive mind is going to say here. So they could still like do those things and you're going to have a lot of reactions be, that was ass. And at that point, it's like, well, what are we really doing here if we're like trying this hard to please a bunch of people that are just always going to say our shows are bad? You know, unless it really is this like, where the stars align and we again pull off another E3 2016, which just simply can't happen every year or every quarter. You know, I feel like there's just some level-headed people there going, fuck it. This is what's in the show, and this is the live stream.
We're also expecting most likely there to be a show in May or somewhere around end of May, June.
Yeah.
If that's the case, let's say we saw Ghost of Yote here with a release date, will we then see it again in May? And we get to the conversation of how often do you have to show these games over and over again before he finally comes out, So it is this weird balancing act. I feel like if they just had, like, if it was just that Intergalactic moved up, that was it. That's literally it. I think that would have flipped the whole thing for a lot of people. You get Naughty Dog's game and you get Housemarque's game, same show. That would be harder to, also, you're right, Ryan. Astro Bot should be in this show. I don't know what Sony's doing. They should be ashamed of themselves. Astro Bot should have led off the show.
Well, that's
5 free levels. If you don't buy it, what's wrong with you? Okay, go there. It is. Go get it. They just added a lot of post-game content. I think more people should know about that.
I agree, but for whatever reason, like they spread all these announcements out.
Disgusting behavior. Astro Bot should be in there. You can get your the PlayStation 5 bundle in there announced.
Yeah. Hey, you said it, not me. So I don't know what they're doing over there, but whatever they do, it will be met with harsh criticism.
I will say
sometimes valid, sometimes valid.
Well, the valid one, Ryan, I would say is where's Wolverine?
Yeah. I mean, well, here's the thing though, right? As you just said, we have May, we have Summer Game Fest, we have the Game Awards. They do spread these things out. So it's like when they don't show up at this event, you got to safely assume it will probably appear somewhere else. If they cram it all into one show, then it's like, oh, great. We're not going to hear from them for another year and a half, 2 years, right?
That's because Wolverine's been missing for a long time.
Well, it seems like when they made that announcement, I mean, we found out that they pretty much had nothing.
Yeah.
They had nothing to show. So you would think it would probably be, honestly, I would even say maybe like later this year. It might not even be locked in for like this May, if it's still going to be like a 2026 game.
I mean, we think, but now we're piling up games in 2026. How many games are going to release there?
Well, maybe a few. It seems like 26 and 27, there should finally be a number of things coming out.
Like, I'm starting to think Intergalactic then. Let's say if Wolverine is next year, the Intergalactic might be 2027. That might be like that late generation Naughty Dog game that they also then remaster for the PS6.
Yeah. I would think Intergalactic is 27. Yeah.
Man, they're running out of time. If we're at that PS6, maybe at the end they're running out of time.
No, there's plenty of time to get all these games on PS6, baby. Come on, man.
We don't even have Sony Santa Monica's game announced. I need to see what Corey's doing.
Well, that too. I would love to see that this year. Maybe that'll be in May, or maybe that'll be. Well, I mean, if they're willing to give Jeff Keighley Naughty Dog's next new IP, if they're willing to christen him with a massive announcement like that, maybe he'll get Santa Monica's game for this year's TGAs.
Okay,
maybe it's possible.
Okay.
Never know. Apparently, we'd rather give all those announcements to Jeff Keighley and not our own presentations. Although it doesn't matter where they show up, obviously. What do we got going on here? Do we even want to talk about this? Is this news, John? You tell me. Phil Spencer on the Xbox Era podcast has confirmed that future live streams will feature PlayStation and Nintendo logos when they're relevant. And he also admits that they're not trying to move PS5 players over to Xbox anymore.
This dude's Phil Spencer's got to be going into these shows thinking it's like Groundhog's Day, because I feel like he gets asked this question all the time. They keep going like, hey, are you moving more games over to the other platform? Is that a thing? It's like, yes. Like, I know he said 4 games. Clearly that's all changed. Like, they are rapid firing games to the PS5. Hellblade 2 is going to be announced here soon for the PS5. Like, that's going to happen. They're going to probably put it on Twitter or something like they did with Forza. Master Chief Collection is going to get announced. I've been trying to figure out how they're going to do that. Maybe that's a developer direct. Maybe they dropped it on Twitter as well. All these games are going, and people keep asking him. And now he's like, yeah, we just showed PlayStation logos in the the developer. Yes, we're going to do that too. Like, and when Switch 2 is allowed to be talked about, they're going to do that too. So I think everyone's still just trying to wrap their head around a strategy that is really difficult to figure out for us who have been following gaming for so long, because it's always been, you make a box, you make games to then sell the box, to then sell games. But it's hard to tell what Microsoft's outlook is going to be going forward, because they say they're going to make a system, but who knows? Who knows in the future, 5-6 years from now, because they do seem to change mid-gen constantly. They're all over the place, but maybe they think they'll eventually grow to indeed be the biggest publisher in gaming and make the most money that way.
So is this, do you think it's still news?
I can't believe it is still news.
It's like, it feels weird to not talk about when it makes so many headlines, but like when are we going to like not, when is it going to feel normal? Like, I know. To me, like the Master Chief Collection is probably it, but
that'll do it. Once, because you're going to get Master Chief Collection, Hellblade 2. Apparently there's a Gears of War collection in the works. That's going to go to PlayStation. Mm-hmm. So at that point, I mean, Fable, you might see Fable show up when they do the release date, and a PS5 logo might be there.
Perfect Dark.
I wouldn't be shocked. Perfect Dark's probably going to be on PlayStation 2. I think anything that's more than a year out is immediately already like, yeah, get the PS5 dev kits going. Let's get this done.
I mean, I will say I do appreciate that clarity of like our live streams will have these now. I don't know if you remember, we talked about that. I think it was last year for one of their like events. I think it was the Xbox Game Showcase, and it was on the Spawncast, and I'm like, is this the show where they just start showing, like, are they okay with showing like competitor logos on the tail end of those trailers just for that like transparency? Like eventually you think they'd do that, and he's saying, yeah, that's what we'll do. So I appreciate
think about that way, Ryan. I mean, if you're a PlayStation gamer, you're tuning into the Xbox show, so they're going to get even more eyes on their show then.
Yeah. I mean, it was always worth watching their shows. And now you've got more of a reason, because you'll just have your answer right then and there. Okay, that's coming to PS5 or my Switch. We do have some business news, some Sony SIE news going on here. So there were some layoffs, which came right next to the formal announcement that SN Systems, which is a company they acquired back in 2005. It's like a development tools company, and they've been making like tools for PlayStation hardware for pretty much the entire time. So they did it a little bit before they were acquired, and it's just kind of a company that most people don't know of. But basically they're going to be integrated directly into SIE. So they made that formal announcement, and this was like right next to somebody mentioning they were I want to get this right here. They're a senior design technologist on the company's UI and UX department, and they said that most of their team was laid off. So I'm not sure if these are related, but it would seem, I don't know if suspicious is the right word here, but maybe like they're just looking to consolidate. Maybe, I don't know.
They've probably come across, I assume, as they call it, redundancies in people's jobs and positions. Yeah. Like they show up and there's one position, but they both have the same title. And it's like, well, now that we've merged you guys in, one of you goes, basically.
Yeah, I don't even think there was a follow-up on like how many people were laid off in this department. But I mean, if we're trying to connect the dots, if they are connected, maybe SN Systems is going to be taking over a lot of the UI responsibilities. I mean, Sony, like they always do a whole new UI for every console. So you would think they're going to start really kicking up the software side for PlayStation 6 if it's going to look completely different. So maybe that kind of aligns with what they're looking to do. I don't really know. But we had that. And then we also have some Sony financials. We've got fiscal year 2024 Q3. So we've got a lot of numbers here to go over. Sony shipped 9.5 million PlayStation 5s this quarter, well, the previous quarter, I should say, for a total of 74.9 million. So if we align that with PS4, the console was at 76.6 million in the same time frame. So it is still trailing behind globally, but in the US, we do know PS5 is about 7% ahead of PS4. Monthly active users did hit a brand new peak here, 129 million during that third quarter. And sales and operating income saw a big increase as well, 16 and 37% respectively year on year, due primarily to hardware sales of non-first-party games and add-on content, and also a decrease in losses from hardware. So those consoles are getting more and more profitable. And then getting into the platform business group, we also learned that 40% of PS5 sold during this quarter were new users. So somebody that never owned a PS5 or PlayStation before. PS Plus revenue is up 20% year on year, directly because of the higher tiers and price revisions. That's basically what they were confirming there. And then for the studio business group, Sony says that Helldivers 2 and Astro Bot winning awards in their categories is a major stride in their portfolio, and these are genres they're aiming to expand. So family friendly and live service. And Sony also reiterated that Ghost of Yotei and Death Stranding 2 are releasing this calendar year, not fiscal year. So they will be launching this calendar year. So if there was any doubt that these games were not hitting on time, they are indeed going to release this year. The big surprise to me out of this report is those shipments. They moved a lot of PlayStation 5. That was way more than I thought, because I do my sales predictions, right? My prediction at the start of 2024 was that they would be at 75 million. Now, I wouldn't know until now how accurate that number was, but looking at the prior quarters, it looked like they were down a little bit further than I was thinking. So it's like, oh, maybe they're at like 73 million. So my guess was like, oh, I'm 2 million off. Then we got the real numbers, and I'm like, whoa, they sold a ton. And I was almost on the dot, 74.9.
Yeah, then uptick from last holiday comparison. That was like 8.4 or something like that. So they're up like more than 1 million from their previous quarter or something, which is, again, very odd, because you usually don't see that. Typically it's like, okay, you sell a bunch and then it starts to slowly wind down as you go along. They went the complete opposite direction there. Now they did some pretty good discounts though. This is like the first year that I remember where it was like, oh yeah, we're taking just $75 off the thing.
Correct.
And it was for like a month. They extended that for a while. So I'm sure that obviously helped. That played into it. And this becomes interesting because you're right, Ryan. This was more than I was thinking as well. And like, if I was to go with the typical where you kind of ramp downwards, it would have been like 8 million, maybe 7, 8 or something like that. Now we're going into a year that they keep saying it. So I'll stick with it. GTA 6 is coming out, and you have a system with the PlayStation that is gaining momentum and has become the default system at this point, which again, very different from what you hear and see online a lot, where it's like people are not happy with the PlayStation stuff, but then clearly the sales are reflecting the general audience is, I think, just gravitating to PS5 as my friend has it to play Fortnite, so I'm going to get the PS5. My friend has to play Call of Duty, I'm going to get Madden, whatever. These games that sell well, as you mentioned, the PS5 is tracking ahead of the PS4 in the US. A lot of these are games that sell well in the US, or are played highly on the monthly active user charts. So I think that it definitely is playing into the idea of this thing driving PS5 sales more than expected. But if this system is becoming that default platform, like we're kind of thinking, because Xbox is I don't say free fall, but they are consistently like we're down 20%, we're down 30%, we're down 25% year over year. Sony's in the opposite direction. GTA 6 is going to have massive implications on PS5 systems sold. Like, it's going to be crazy what GTA 6 could do here. So that makes me wonder if we will actually tick up again this holiday if GTA 6 actually arrives and makes the cut for 2025.
For sure. That price reduction, I would have to figure that in PS5 Pro. I mean, it's low volume, but it obviously helps. But that was an aggressive price reduction. 75 off. That was if it was a digital console, that was $375 new with a warranty. Yeah. So that was that must have like helped it really get over the finish line. I very much was thinking like, oh, they're gonna do like 7.98 this quarter. That was a ton. And so, I mean, and they keep saying like almost every quarter that they've reduced losses in hardware. So they've got probably a lot of wiggle room to do these price reductions during these very important seasons. And if this thing's launching in November, December, I mean, they could not be more lined up. As you mentioned, like they've got this clear runway where Xbox is like just not really in the conversation for a lot of households. It seems like they've got to be like on Prozac, living it up over there. Like, God damn, we're about to sell a bunch of these things.
Well, and you can't discount Monster Hunter. That's out in a few weeks at the end of February. That's gonna have
That's
a
it.
massive effect in Japan, I assume. I assume people, even though the PS5 is kind of expensive there, I feel like that's gonna have a pretty big jump in terms of just console sales because yeah, Monster Hunter Wilds, okay, I'm gonna get the PS5. Or even in the US, Monster Hunter has become more and more popular. I mean, that's gonna be like, it's not gonna be GTA 6, obviously, but it will have an uptick and it will close out their fiscal year, I think, in a pretty strong light. GTA 6, man, that's the one. That's it. If
So here's the question. They're 7% behind PS4 globally, launch aligned. Do they close that gap just off Grand Theft Auto 6?
if Grand Theft Auto 6 makes this holiday, and I think that's kind of important because there's only so many holiday seasons left for the PS5. And while holiday season in general spikes sales, if Sony can line this up and have even more shipping out, they don't even probably have to discount them. I think they would actually sell more. They might break 10 million, which sounds crazy, but once in a multi-generational release with GTA 6, if Sony can get word from hey, yeah, we are going to, it is coming out this year, and Grand Theft Auto Online is going to come out a month or two after, that Sony might want to go for it. I could see them then, if that happens, they will outsell the PS4 with the PS5.
Yeah, I think they're actually really well positioned to close the gap. Even, I don't want to say without GTA 6, but it's like if they maintain a decent momentum, I'm sure we can check the same quarter launch line with PS4, because at that point PS4 would be down even further. PS4 in the same time frame would not have such a big important game like GTA 6 coming out. So conceivably, I think they could definitely close that gap.
I think if GTA 6 is there, we'll say it's November and it makes it out, because it's going to have an effect on the PS5 for like, I think at least 2 years of just more sales than expected. Then I think it outsells the PS4 by like 10 million units.
Yeah,
I think it's significant.
Yeah. What do you think about this? Because this made headlines that they're going to expand in the family-friendly category.
I think that's a good idea. The other thing to remember here is you mentioned 40% new PlayStation owners with the 9.5 million that shipped. And the way they described it was somebody who plugged their PS5 in for the first time, turned it on, and made a PlayStation Network account for the first time. Mm-hmm. So these are people who are going through the steps for the first, like we assume that's the first PS5 they've probably bought in a long time, or a PlayStation they bought in a long time, because they didn't have a PS4 to then transfer their account, even PS3, transfer the account over. So in that mind, it makes me think of maybe somebody who bought it for the family, maybe somebody who bought it for Astro Bot. It's possible. I'm just throwing it out there. And, or Madden, or as you mentioned, something family friendly. It seems like most of the people who wanted it for Demon Souls, or who wanted it for Eternal, or who wanted it for God of War, or any of these, like, I don't say hardcore, but more in the know kind of games, really already have their PlayStation. These are people who are like, wow, that was $75 off. And look, they have all these cool games that would work for the family. And sure, I can play Call of Duty, but it seems like family friendly is something that I don't say Sony has neglected, but they haven't put as much focus on it. Maybe Astro Bot woke them up a bit to it.
I'd hope so. Yeah, they never really shied away from it, but they definitely, well, no, maybe that is the better way to put it. They shied away from it. We had like Lego Horizon, Sackblade, Big Adventure. It's not like they don't like family-friendly games or anything, but it's definitely been deprioritized compared to like a lot of the stuff they were doing on PS2 to PS3, let's say. So yeah, I would think and hope Astro Bot is maybe a sort of a new realization to invest more in the in that market, and that sort of, I don't want to say niche, but that category.
Do you gain more confidence seeing Astro Bot be this family-friendly 3D platformer that's just winning Game of the Year awards? They're like, oh wow, you can win Game of the Year doing that.
I'm sure they knew that.
You think so? I don't know. Yeah. I don't know. Sometimes I look at like you think Herman Hulst looked at that and was like, this is gonna win Game of the Year? I don't know. Something about that.
I wouldn't say that.
Like, Mark Cerny was there though. He's in the front row. Like, I knew that's Astro. I knew it. Like he was so excited for him and stuff. I don't know. Herman Hulst is like, that should have been Horizon.
No. Oh man. No, I would think if Herman was good at the job, bear
I
with
like
me.
how you put if in there.
Well, yeah, as in like, you'd want to be collaborative in the sense that like you'd reach out to people. Like I'm sure he talks with Mark and, how do you feel about this game? Because Mark's so deeply involved in so many of the first party
Oh yeah.
projects. So I think they always have a good eye for like just high caliber software. Did they expect all these Game of the Year awards? Probably not, but I'm sure they felt confident in the quality of the game.
Yeah, that's I don't know. So I still have questions around Herman. Although a lot of people do. A lot of people have a lot of questions about Jim Ryan too. But the I feel like Astrobot doing what it's doing right now in terms of the awards. We know Sony is very sensitive to that with their scores and stuff. At least it's been discussed. I mean, you got Astrobot out there sweeping. It's like, maybe we could do family friendly a bit more too. Maybe that would work. And eventually, maybe you could hit that one general audience game that just takes off and is like, it's available to everyone, right? There's no like, oh, it's a mature rated game. We're not going to buy this for the 9 or 10-year-old really. But maybe you get that one that does explode in sales. And I don't know if you're ever going to get a Mario, as part of the PlayStation family. But hey, if you look at Mario sales, you get a quarter of that. You're pretty happy.
I mean, I think it's always worth pointing out we had the business segment briefing from I think it's 2024. And yeah, I think it was last year. But that one where they sort of had a hierarchy for their portfolio and how they invest in the projects they put out. One of those ones on there was a modest budget in terms of scope and scale, but it's experimental titles or family friendly category. That might have been the middle section. If I remember correctly, it was the high caliber stuff, your AAA, like God of War and Spider-Man and that. And then there was live service, and then there was experimental. And that was like, that's like an Astro Bot. They've always wanted to do these. They've always explored them. They're continuing to explore them, but you would think with the recent success of Astro Bot that they've got a little more confidence doing even more projects than they otherwise would have done prior.
Yes.
Now, with that said, though, mentioning Jim Ryan, let's move on to this. So, Shuhei Yoshida, the man which has been an open book ever since he left his 31-year career at PlayStation. So, recently he spoke with GamesBeat, talking with Dean Takahashi, and it was a really long interview. A lot of cool stuff in there, a lot of anecdotes. We obviously can't cover all of it, so we'll at least touch on the one that was had a lot of discussion surrounding it. So it's kind of a long answer he gave. I just want to at least provide full context on what was asked and what was said. So Dean asked him, like, why did he retire? Shuhei responded saying he didn't retire, he just left the company. So he's talking about like Kutaragi, Kaz Hirai, Andrew Howe, Sean Layden, himself. They were all from the PS1 days, and they wanted to hand down these roles to a new generation. So he's talking about Herman Hulst and Hideaki Nishino. So Shuhei's talking about his last 5 years supporting indies. He wanted to communicate to new people joining PlayStation that it's really important to support indies. So one of the reasons why he got the indie job from Jim is because they were criticized from the indie community, which nowadays they apparently don't hear a lot of that. He says last year they had a lot of anecdotes from indie partners that their new games were selling better on PlayStation than other platforms, whereas before the Switch versions would sell 3 to 5 times more. So when he got the job, he told Jim that he didn't want to create a new indie department. That's just another vertical for the company, and he didn't want to complicate things. So Shuhei's personal goal was to make his position obsolete. So with where they are now, Jim leaving, Nishino and Herman stepping in, he decided it was time to leave, which at this point, Shuhei was then asked if he faced any personal challenges handling some of the big developers and having to hand those over with, handing it over to somebody else to deal with. And Shuhei responded with, and I quote, "Moving from first party to indies. Well, I had no choice. When Jim asked me to do the indie job, the choice was to do that or leave the company. But I felt very strongly about the state of PlayStation and indies, and I really wanted to do this. I believed I could do something unique for that purpose. That was the bigger change for me personally, moving from first party to indies, then leaving the company this year." And he said more stuff, but like that's obviously the one area that people are focusing on was I had no choice. It was either do the indie job or leave the company. So A lot of talk going on around this, John. What do you think?
Well, it doesn't sound good when you hear that. It really is like, hey, you either move to indie, move off first party, move to indie, or you just retire. Basically, people have speculated if he was given the rooftop job, as in we're not gonna like publicly fire you, but you're kind of gonna come in and have a much lesser role, and you can hang out on the roof if you want, right? That's in like Japan, that's a whole thing where you could be in a company and they have like the room you go to where we're not going to give you any work, but you have to come into work and you just sit. Like Konami was apparently famous for having one of those. You just sit here basically. And then when it's time to go home, you go home. And it's sort of like, almost like honor and stuff's brought into it. And I don't want to be a waste on the company's time and stuff. So I'll go find a new job. That's kind of what was speculated what happened to him, where he was just like, you can kind of do what you want with the indies, whatever, go over here, Shuhei. We'll take care of the real business here. I will say he did at least he was there for he outlasted Jim. He was there longer than Jim Ryan, so he outlasted him in that sense. But when he says it like that in the interview, I didn't see we didn't see the tone or how he said it.
Right. Yeah, he could have like chuckled or something when saying it.
But when you see the words
when you read it
screen, and you like, we all have the thought of reading it as somebody who's just really annoyed saying it out loud, and is like, they forced me out of the company. It was either this or leave, and it's it doesn't read well. I'll tell you that. You look at that, you go, woof. It must, because we hear about the stories about how Sean Lane was escorted out of the building, like the old regime was kind of like forced out, and then Jim Ryan, who of course is in Europe, comes over and just takes over all of PlayStation. Herman Holst is on the come up with Horizon, of course. And I guess just because it's weird. That would have been a position where I thought Shuhei may have been in line to kind of run things for a bit.
Like lead the whole organization?
I mean, you look at the history of him and it's like, yeah, kind of.
I don't know if he would have wanted to do that.
You don't think so?
He never struck me as that kind of person. But I don't know him, obviously, so it's tough to say.
It is hard to say.
You're right, though. It reads awful. Like that's this quote has been blowing up in the community because it reads bad. I would love to see like how he said it, because like it's weird. Shuhei is also the kind of person where like anytime you hear him talk, he's like the most joyful sort of man you could ever listen to. Like he always answers with like a smile for everything, or he's always like chuckling or like tone would be like set the I guess the answer here, but like there's still no getting around like you were given an ultimatum and that doesn't seem right, because like
it seems disrespectful.
Yeah, well, it's like when he left, well, I say left, when he took on the indie job too, like the tea leaves were always there in that he always loved smaller games and independent titles. I mean, he's got his Twitter account. He's always been very active on social media. And like, even when he was leading the first party teams, he was just always like really into the smaller titles. So like that transition, which, wasn't as lateral as you would think, like it made sense to me. It was like, oh man, he gets to sort of lead this initiative, and he kept doing it for years. And I think it's, we'd be remiss to not mention Greg Rice also came in as well to work with the indies too. So it's not like they didn't care about indies. I would be very upset if this was like sort of as you imply, the kind of job to just sort of shoo him away. And it's like, if you want to go do this, go ahead. I would prefer like this was something the company deeply cared about. And it's like, yes, you should be supporting indies, and this should be a very important integral role within the company. So I would hope that's what this is. But yeah, it's weird how he like said it. I would hate for it to be something where like if he wanted to stay with PlayStation for a few more years, that was the sort of ultimatum he got. It's not the greatest thing to see.
No, it sounds like we don't want you around the first party games because we already have a strategy in mind. And then to be fair, one of the other interviews, he has talked quite a bit. You're right.
Yeah.
He's very open for somebody who just left Sony. I feel like there'd be some guardrails in place, but I mean, he was brought up about the live service initiative right now from Sony that's been going on and some of the struggles. And he's basically like, well, I wouldn't have done that. And like you hear that, you go, oh wait. Then they told maybe he saw what the roadmap was, and even he was like, this isn't really my thing. And they're like, well, you can either go do indies or leave. It's like, whoa, okay.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing we can sort of safely nail down is like, because Sean Layden has also been like, what's so funny about Sean is that like, he just like leaves these breadcrumbs that are so obvious to pick up. He'll never say it, but he'll always talk in interviews like, oh, well, what a big surprise. Or he'll do like funny things on Twitter where he replies with a GIF that like, it's just like a GIF that like, it's responding to a post about how he was right about how expensive games are, or that live service was a mistake. So it's like, you can kind of piece together what happened with like those two. As far as like, if they stayed in the positions they were in, they wouldn't have doubled down nearly as much on live service. Maybe they wouldn't have done anything in the live service category.
It's true. But they might have been fine with the Fortnite money that they get, the 30% cuts. They might have been fine with that. Yeah. Like, yeah, that's plenty. We don't need to worry about that. We need to worry on the quality and the creativity, and Fib Ribbon needs a sequel, whatever else. But you got to say, like, they would have been a bit more traditional maybe with it. Whereas Jim Ryan, he did a lot with the European division for PlayStation, basically took over Europe with that brand. Definitely a numbers guy. Like we see him hold the controller and we know, but
you always bring up that picture.
I mean, how can you not? It's incredible, incredible stuff. This does not help Jim Ryan's view in the PlayStation Eye right now online. This makes him look somehow he looks worse now. And it's crazy because he has done so much in terms of just stepping on rakes constantly. The Gran Turismo, look how bad that, who wants to play that junk? And it's like the PS1 being played. And it's him going to that studio knowing that they were about to be shut down and like having the party with them. Yeah, that's not a great look.
Yeah,
he put his face on a cookie when he leaves too, and it's like, man.
Well, that's the weird part is like granted, it's a big organization. I don't know everybody there, but I've always heard like that people like him. Like he's always been like a nice guy to talk to, and there's never been sort of untoward feelings about how he like led the organization. If you work there, I'm sure there's definitely people at PlayStation that didn't like him, but it's just like generally speaking, I've always heard like, yeah, people did not have a problem with him at all. But it's like, even if this guy did good things on paper, which he absolutely did over his 30-year tenure at the company, at this point, it doesn't matter. Like there's a certain narrative surrounding what this guy did at the company. Yeah. There's no getting around it. John, he did the Ice Bucket Challenge. If you recall, he did the Ice Bucket Challenge. And I think he nominated Bobby Kotick too. I think, if I remember correctly.
He's not doing that. Did he do it?
I feel like it's still in my likes on YouTube. I could probably find it again, but he did do the Ice Bucket Challenge. See,
Bobby did too?
He's a good guy. No, Jim did.
Yeah, Bobby's like, what do you think I am?
He's a bucket of water on my head. No.
He does strike me as somebody right now who has no idea any of this is going on online. Like he's just out. he's like living it up, cabin somewhere, just hanging out, living life. I mean, I'm sure he got the nice severance, or not severance, but like retirement package, everything. Like I'm sure he's well off, and he's just hanging out somewhere, not paying attention to any of this. But still, it doesn't help. Then what people attach Herman Hulst to Jim Ryan. This doesn't help Herman Hulst at all either, because he was there too. It's not like he wasn't. Yeah. So it's like, hey, look, we got a plan and a strategy for first party over the next 6 years, 7 years or whatever. If we don't need your first party, you're either out or you can do indie stuff, because that's the lane we've set up for you. So go over there. And then Herman Hulst is there and is like, how many Horizon games can we grant now? He's just kind of like, I don't say collateral damage, because he's obviously participated in a lot of this, but definitely the perception of Jim Ryan is like flowing over to Herman Hulst as well.
Yeah, he's unfortunately catching a lot of that lingering ideology. But like we discussed with Herman before, like arguably a lot of the cancellations, which are now under his watch, there's a opportunity here where we could see them course correct in this, as Shuhei was implying, like they've handed over this sort of generational leadership. Like a lot of the old PlayStation guys, they're all gone. Your Ken, your Kaz, Andrew, Jack Trenton, like all those guys are gone. So and even Jim, because he was a part of that cycle too. Your beloved PlayStation leadership, Jim was in there. They're all gone now. So this turnover is going to happen. So we'll see where Herman kind of falls with that. Same with Hideaki and Ishino, because it's going to take multiple years to really see what what kind of fruit they end up bearing. But in this case, what's unfortunate is that because Jim was definitely more of a numbers, very aggressive, I want results kind of guy, he was also probably very motivated by just market trends, which was and still is live service. And there's like a fiduciary duty to shareholders of like, PlayStation's big. Why are you guys not making live service games? So, well, maybe we should start doing that. And some of the guys that get games, your Sean, your Shuhei, to them, it's like, well, no, but there's that friction of fiduciary duties to shareholders and returning results. And then there's the sort of more game guys that like, they want to, make what people want. Right. There's that friction. There's obvious friction.
They probably would have been able to explain it a bit better as, hey, I know live service popular. We're doing what we can to get more and more of them on our platform, but allow third parties to develop them because we're really focused in on the game aspect, but the sort of the image of the company, and the games that we put out are only found on PlayStation from PlayStation Studios. They could have dressed it up as creativity drives the industry. And you've seen Sean Layden speak on stage and he's well spoken and stuff with that. And Shuhei can, I'm sure, be up there with him in a panel and, do the smiley, like, hey, look, these are all the really cool indies and these are all the really cool first party games. I think they would have been able to present it better than Jim Ryan, who would have been like, this is where we think the profit margin will go if we attack live service aggressively and we hit 3 of the 12. Because then if you're an investor, like, well, yeah, you guys are gonna hit 3 of the 12, but then they haven't. So it's there's no good result. It's that what if, right? It's like, what if Shuhei took over instead of Jim? What would have happened then? Like that's all. I think that's the question people are asking, hearing about Shuhei getting forced out. It's like, okay, we assume this, but now it's kind of being put out here by Shuhei himself in writing, even in this interview, that maybe he could have gone back and be like, I said that. Can we kind of take that off the record now? It's in there. He said it. What would have happened if Shuhei was at the helm when the decision was made for live services?
Are you asking me?
Yeah. I think that's the question that's being asked right now, just in general by people. It's like, man, he really was forced out.
Again, I feel like he wouldn't want to progress, but I don't want to answer for him. Shuhei read to me just like a lot of the other guys that left, which were well before any sort of drama at the company. When you do 20, 30 years somewhere, like sometimes them leaving is just not really, there's no drama to be had. It's like the guys did their career. Right. They want to move on. So Shuhei never struck me as the kind of person that wanted to keep going and like climb the ladder. Now, if that's true or not, I don't know. Cause again, I'm not Shuhei. To be honest, because of this line, like, the next thing he's on, you would hope he's like asked to clarify this.
Yes.
So maybe he'll provide more context. I'm sure even if he tried to like clean it up and say, oh, I didn't mean it like that, people aren't going to take that answer, but hopefully he does get asked that directly and maybe we get more context on what that meant. But it seems kind of clear what took place, presumably.
Disagreements behind the scenes. Somebody has to leave. There you go. Or move out of the way, get out of the way, basically, because this is what the company wants, is what we're doing, kind of thing, right? Get outvoted,
He did say, I think it was in the same interview, he also like offhandedly mentioned that like, when like one of the reorganizations happened, Sean's job was like eliminated. So like, it's just like, there's nowhere to go.
Yeah. It sounded like that separation wasn't great either. Like, again, the word going around was that it was
Oh, it definitely wasn't. Wasn't amicable, I think.
no, it's like escort out of the building kind of situations. So yeah, not great.
Mm. It's a weird thing when you've got like senior people that leave, because it's kind of like if there is nowhere for them to go, you don't like take a lower position, right? You just like leave and get the same role at like a different company, basically.
Yeah.
You
I
wouldn't
feel like the interesting thing though, Ryan, is that Shuhei says he's not retired, right?
he wants to keep doing indie stuff, which important distinction too. Like he always struck me as a guy that wanted to do the indie stuff. So like now that he's left PlayStation, he very much wants to be an independent consultant, basically.
Yeah. I think we'll see his name show up in a lot of, like, the special thanks section. I think we'll see that a lot, where he went to different studios, smaller ones, as you're saying, upstart ones, and did maybe like the whiteboard talk for 2 hours and just going through that kind of stuff, that mindset. And then he'll show up in credits in that way. I think that'd be interesting to see that going forward.
And he does. That's why he's doing so many interviews. He just wants to get his name out there, and this is what he's doing. So more power to him. I mean, the guy's not going to have a problem finding work, I think. So
no.
Good for him. Good for him. I did want to touch on another anecdote that came from a different interview. This is near and dear to me. Ted Price, president and CEO, Insomniac Games, retiring very soon. He was speaking with Greg Miller of Kind of Funny, and Greg was asking about Resistance 4. And Ted did confirm that they did pitch the game. Now, he never said when they did this, like when they made the pitch for Resistance 4. So that's kind of important here. But Ted did say that the pitch was a wonderful concept. Just the timing and the market opportunity didn't work out. The Insomniac team was really passionate about extending the story, and they spent a lot of time working on the backstory, exploring themes like where the Chimera came from. And they know fans are always asking for this game, but basically they did pitch it, didn't work. And, there is a timeline here where we would have gotten Resistance 4, but that was not the case, unfortunately. So,
yeah, I guess what do you think this time, like, what do you think this was?
Like when I think about the timing, I start to realize that I'm not sure if the time would have made a big difference. Like if they pitched it right after 3 or maybe a little after 3, because the reality is the franchise didn't really do that well. Like Resistance 1 sold 3.8 million copies. Resistance 2 did 2.8 million. And then the third game did 1.7 million. So it was on a pretty steepish decline for every single new game.
And the development cost went up for each one too. Resistance 3 was just over $36 million to make, which the first one was 27 million.
Yep. That's not really penciling out. So I'm not sure if there's really a good time to ever pitch Resistance 4. But having said that, I'll tell you, for some reason, I feel like this is one IP that could come back. And I don't say that about every PlayStation IP out there. I feel somewhat strongly that like I feel like you could reboot this franchise and it would sort of have a really big rebound versus like what it did originally on PS3. Because think about it, it's an alternate universe, alternate history, sci-fi game. It's got a very, to me, unique looking identity with the Chimera and the Insomniac weaponry, and it's a first-person shooter, and it's got a campaign, and it's like, let's not make it full-blown live service. Let's make sure it has a campaign, and the game could probably look insanely beautiful on PlayStation 5. I feel like this is like one franchise where it can kind of stand on its own in the portfolio because they don't really have anything like this, a sci-fi FPS.
Right.
I think this is one IP that could come back.
Especially since at that time, this was towards the end of the PS3 360 life. This was right at the end of 2011. At that point, we went through the entire generation getting these kind of games all the time.
Exactly.
All the time. I mean, it was constant. That is like, oh yeah, can we make a first person action shooter? Yes. Easy. Let's do it. And then you got sequel after sequel. It did get to a point where it was kind of getting, again, repetitive. Now people are clamoring for this from PlayStation, something like this. You're right. I think you could do 4. You could do a reboot. Just call it
I
Resistance.
was gonna say reboot. Yeah, like I don't
Yeah.
think you do a sequel. I think you do like you don't have to remake it, but just call it Resistance, and it's like 2018 God of War. Like it's a completely new sort of. Well, that was technically a sequel, but you know what I mean.
And I don't think you have to do the live service thing. I think you could do like just the arcade arena style shooter online. And yes, you could still do cosmetic microtransactions. They don't have to have a battle pass or a roadmap or like occasionally you do what Astro Bot's doing right now. You show up with a new map. Hey, there's a new map. That's it, right?
I mean, honestly, maybe you can do like more of a live service approach, but I think it's firm on a single player campaign. Have a campaign, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Have a campaign. But I'm saying like if like we talked about Factions 2, apparently that got so big they decided to make its own game. You don't have to do that. Like you can just have a multiplayer attached to it. Doesn't have to be crazy built out, just to be fun, and people can get online and play against each other, and it's like great. Maybe there's some unlocks, fine. You don't have to keep people playing this game for eternity. Okay, we can move on eventually. It's okay. So that's I would like to see that though. I think that is something that is sorely missing from their library, their lineup right now, is some kind of first person shooter action based game, and as you say, with a campaign. So I say bring it back at the very least, though, Ryan. My gosh, where's the remaster collection?
I know that sucks.
My gosh, like, come on, get it on PC as well. Get Nixes on board. Come on, let's get this moving.
Look, if there's something that I would love to see them do, it's like because everyone's clamoring for the PS3 emulation. It's like honestly, like just start contracting ports out. That's realistically all you need. Let's get Resistance over. Let's get Infamous over. Let's, I'd say Motorstorm, but you're gonna have to take out a lot of licensed music. But whatever. Get Motorstorm over. Like I contract this stuff out. At least get them playable on PS4 and 5. And I would honestly prefer ports over like an emulation layer that's like super dodgy and the games barely look any better.
And I want people to understand this is much different than the remasters that have been criticized from Sony. These make sense because they are only playable on the PlayStation 5 through streaming. It's just not a great experience for a first-person shooter. My gosh, it's not. So this an Infamous collection, like those are the remasters and collections that make sense. We had them on the PS3, right? With like Jak and Daxter collection. Like, oh wow, that's Sly Cooper. It makes sense. Like, I don't know why it is so weird for them to be like, I don't know if we can do this, or they haven't done it yet. Some kind of hold up. I don't know.
Well, that's exactly how I picture it, is like just all those PS2 collections. We don't really need to do a lot to these games. Give them a resolution and frame rate bump, and just people will be happy.
Yeah, a lot of value. 3 games and one package. That's pretty good.
Like, I'll do you one better. Nickel and dime me. Just let me get them again. Sell Resistance 1 again. Sell 2 again. I just get them playable. If they don't want to be that charitable with a collection of 3 games for like $60, like I'll take each one at 30 or something like that. I don't know. Do something.
3 games for 70.
Okay, yeah, that too.
They might be able to make that. I don't know. Maybe. It seems to make sense, and that actually I think would be a good one to test the waters to see how much do people really still like Resistance. Let's find out.
Well, I would think the remaster wouldn't be a great benchmark for that. Just if only because I feel like the reboot in my head would.
Okay, yeah.
If there's a theoretical, like let's say a reveal trailer for a reboot, and it looks in my head, I'm picturing something that looks so cool and vivid and different, and I don't know, man.
Sounds like set up for disappointment. Let's talk about though the multiplayer for Resistance 3. Maybe they give one of the games multiplayer for online, just see how many players would that actually attract to it. It feels like that could build up to the reboot you've now created in your mind, Ryan, that you really want. So let's work towards that. The remaster. Come on, Sony. Let's do one where they say remaster and everyone's not mad afterwards.
How about they just like release them and don't put the word remaster on it?
That would work too. I think it is that simple. I really do.
He said, I think it really is that simple.
I do. I think if they had called that Days Gone thing anything else, it wouldn't have gotten the kind of laughter that it did.
Maybe. Or maybe it would just cause another controversy of like, they're not even calling it a remaster. Unbelievable. It could be that too. I only have a few small PS production announcements going on here. So we had a number of things pop up. Twisted Metal Season 2 got a new trailer. Looks like the Twisted Metal tournament's actually going to take place now. So got that. Until Dawn got a new movie trailer. So that's still coming out in April. Yeah, still coming out in April. Still looks like what they're doing there. And we touched on this last episode, but the HBO executive speaking with Deadline recently said that they do think it looks likely that The Last of Us is going to be 4 seasons. So sounds like that is what's going to happen there.
Wow,
so
they're going to get a lot of that second game.
A lot out of that second game. Yeah, a lot out of that's probably going to, well, it seems like they were filming season 2 and 3 like concurrently. So 3 is probably not that far behind. 4 might be a little bit further out. So there was that. And then I feel like we would be remiss to not mention that thing that popped up during the Super Bowl halftime show, the PlayStation buttons on the stage.
Hey,
so, that was interesting.
I think that worked with. Did Sony have any kind of involvement with that at all?
I don't think so. Because, yeah, well, according to Wired, because they actually did like get insight on that show. Kendrick wanted the symbols to be on there to help portray his life as a video game. And the thing is, Sony is like very particular about the button placement and how they appear and how they're arranged. And just like you can see from it just doesn't look like they were involved, when you look at the show. But like that whole presentation went live. So it was just kind of a silly thing. It's like, oh shit, PlayStation buttons. Look at that.
But you saw was the PlayStation buttons, and what does this go back to? The PlayStation becoming the default system.
Yeah, it is for a lot of people.
They made it into a Super Bowl halftime show because
without asking
Lamar's
for
like,
it.
I mean, what says video games? Oh yeah, obviously the PlayStation symbols. Duh, it's a default system. I heard it on Click R3, so yeah, obviously put them in the halftime show.
Well, I know Kendrick's listening. That's what I pretty much always talk on this podcast as if he's listening. So
yes.
So that happened. I don't know. I thought that was pretty goofy. That's all I've got for you. Those are some of the big stories from the past 2 weeks.
It was a busy 2 weeks. And Ryan may be doing a video going over that entire Shuhei interview, or most of the highlights from that Shuhei interview. So maybe I'll be Let's Talk PlayStation this week. Maybe.
I mean, I'll probably cover more of the what was that? It was a long interview, a lot of stuff in there.
Yeah, he did say quite a bit. So you might want to tune into Click R, or you're in Click R3 now. Tune into Let's Talk PlayStation later on this week. Check it out. What do you got for us, Ryan?
For
the real section. Yeah.
For PSX, go and give it to you. The time where we look back on PlayStation history, something nostalgic, interesting, or maybe just a little factoid that you didn't know about. I do want to reference, speaking of Shuhei here and the indies, I wanted to reflect on E3 2013 because E3 2013, very interesting thing Sony did during their show, which was Adam Boyes, which at the time he was the VP of third-party relations. They did this little section of the press conference where they brought up a bunch of indie developers and they got to play their game live on stage in this kind of like very interesting panel where, because the stage was pretty big, so you had like 9 separate screens and then all the developers are playing their games. And they were able to make that announcement of like, here are all these indies, and guess what? They're coming to PS4. Because this was a big deal at the time for what Sony was doing, ramping up to PlayStation 4's release, is that they were going to really create this dialogue with smaller developers and court indie developers on PlayStation, which at the time was not as prevalent as it is nowadays. Like nowadays, you can watch a state of play, a Nintendo Direct, anything that Xbox is doing, and like indies are always showing up or filling out the show and things like that. But this, at the time where E3 was definitely still a trade show and it was for retail partners, and it was just not really a known thing to have a bunch of these smaller studios be able to present on stage. Most notably, they also, I mean, these were games that did not have any sort of like direct formal partnership. So it's not like they were being bought out or anything. It was a well-known thing that at the time Sony was handing out dev kits and doing loan programs for their PS4 kits, and they moved over to x86. So they just wanted to make it very friendly to get your small game over on PlayStation. So during that E3 presentation, there was Oddworld New and Tasty, Secret Ponchos, Raise the Dead, Transistor, Galaxy Z, Don't Starve, which that became a PS Plus game, Octodad Dadliest Catch, Outlast, and Mercenary Kings, I think it was too. So that was definitely kind of a cool thing that they did at the time, was being able to showcase all those indies, and it was very different. It wasn't how it is nowadays, where indies are pretty much always showing up during these live streams.
Yeah, I was looking at the stream now. I saw Outlast and noticed that immediately, them showing it on stage. It's interesting to look back. I mean, this is June 10th, 2013, from what they have here on this IGN video. And I even looking at some of the comments, they say this locked me into getting a PS4. They're really open to independence and have a common development environment, lowering the barriers for developers. It's 11 years ago, that comment. The entire conference was amazing. A lot of positive comments on this. The first Oddworld game blew my mind, this person says. Wow. This is it's interesting because they really did just stand up there, person off to the side. They're just playing the game and it's up on the projector, up on the screen.
That's the like E3 was that. We're talking over 10 years ago. That was a time where it was like very much a trade show for retail partners. Like there was no expectation for like, a small team that are getting to release a $20 game on PSN. Like to be up on the E3 stage was just not really a thing that was even possible for them. So it was a very big statement on Sony's part to do that, basically. So that was like sort of their, I don't want to say peak, but like that was when they were really doubling down on indies. Then like towards the end of the PS4 cycle, they kind of lost their way. And that's kind of what Shuhei was getting at recently. So then he went into that indie job and they wanted to sort of get back to where they were with PlayStation 4.
Yeah, I mean, you notice now, and even like State of Play, we just saw it pop up. There were some smaller games in there. And the recent State of Play, for a slot like that being really shown actually prominently next to some big games, we saw the stats that it was some crazy high concurrent viewer count.
Yeah.
For the State of Play recently, it was like more than 2 million or something like that.
Most viewed State of Play now.
Yeah. So the fact that you hear that, and then you also see your Octopus game was in there. A small game, like those kind of games is that's weird.
That small game from Konami. Yeah.
Well, you gotta like that's not the AAA style game. They're probably contracting out to another studio. Like studio is dealing with them, and it's like, oh, cool, we get our game, and because we're with Konami, we're gonna get our game into the State of Play. So you could have like a publisher work with a smaller studio and stuff. But like very clearly, they have games in there now more consistently from smaller studios, even in like their big stage where it's going to close out with Housemarque's new game or something.
Yep.
So that's interesting. It's a very basic way of doing it. Hey, get up on stage and play the game. Show them whatever. It doesn't have to be high production value. We're just going to show them the game. Look, Oddworld is right there.
It's a big deal at the time. Big deal. PSX going to give it to you. That's it, John. That's the show.
That's sad. I kind of missed this kind of an E3 now looking at this.
I know. Well, that was also that's the famous E3 where they did the slam dunk on Microsoft.
They buried them, yeah.
Yeah, but that's what E3 2013 is always known for. I do always remember the indie section too, which was really important at the time for what kind of statement they were trying to make to developers, big and small.
Yeah, it's for coming out of the PS3 generation where you had that difficult hardware to develop for and stuff, and here comes the PS4, much easier, and now they're open to indies like much more so. It's you could see it. Well, I think that's our show for today, Ryan. Almost 3 hours.
I think we did it.
3 hours.
Broke our record from last week or last 2 weeks ago.
Car 3 number 17 in the books. We got coming up, Ryan? Anything good?
I got some stuff. I got something that I think people always expect from me every year. That's in the works. So I can't really say much more.
Platinum trophies. Oh, no. I know what it is. Okay, never mind. It's I get what you're saying. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Happens every year. It is indeed coming. I just wait a little bit further into the year because it's always like too on the nose when it's fucking January and I'm already doing it. So I
Did you
wait a
see
little
that?
bit.
Did you see that PS2 dashboard that got translated?
I did see that. Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know if you're going to look into that. It's actually pretty cool.
Oh, it's very cool. Yeah. It's neat to see it like that.
Did you know that some of those channels you can go in there and they have a bunch of like some of them have just games you can download and play. Well, they kind of download in real time, but they're kind of streamed as well. And they have leaderboards and everything is still up. Like it's all there.
Yeah, it's really neat.
So it's very interesting to see that. But yeah, I was playing around with that in a video, just check it out. That was kind of cool. So I need to get I have a PS3 video I got to get done soon too. But
yeah, I'm waiting on it. I'm waiting over here.
I know. I need to get that done and out. So maybe that'll be this weekend. Might be the move. But yeah, that's our episode for Click R3. Shout out to everyone tuning in. Drop a like. Go check out Ryan as well. Got him linked down below. Thanks everyone for listening to us on the podcast networks. I'm seeing ratings come in on like Apple. Some people left ratings on there. No one was mad either. Everyone was just like 5 stars.
Oh,
yeah, I know, right? I'm waiting for the 1-star review to come in.
I'm sure it'll happen. Or we're out here doing our best.
Yeah, any rating is a good rating, I guess. But thanks everyone for tuning in. We'll back in a couple of weeks to do it all over again. We'll see you guys then.